This episode of Video Game Book Club is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to support the Boss Rush Network and our family of podcasts, head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/BossRushNetwork. Thanks for your continued support.
Hello everybody, welcome to Video Game Book Club. I'm your host and Light Excited Eddie V. Joining me is the one, the only bossman himself, Mr. Corey Dirrig. Hello, good sir.
Hello, Ed. We're doing a thing. We're doing a book club thing. So yeah. Hello. Weird to be talking to you about Destiny again.
We're kind of doing a retrospective in a sense.
Yeah. Before we get into all that, I need to address the patrons because I know they voted on Stray, and Stray was supposed to be the book club this month. We had some very weird technical difficulties recording the Stray book club, and so due to scheduling, we had to push the Stray book club back, and this is kind of what we're going to substitute it with. It's still coming. I think next month we'll probably just do two book clubs, one in the middle of the month and one at the end, so we stay on track. But I'm just, I know everybody voted on Stray, and the Stray book club is coming. It's just the day the book club is supposed to come out was when everybody's schedule kind of worked out to record it again. So it's coming, I promise everybody. But we wanted to deliver, we promise you a book club every month. And so this was the kind of middle ground here because, obviously Destiny, the Final Shape came out and it's pretty relevant right now. And I'm a big Destiny fan, and we're going to kind of go over, like Ed said, it's like a retrospective of the entire series plus the Final Shape kind of in depth. And we're going to kind of talk about it more at a surface level thing. We're not going to go into deep into like the nitty gritty the way I do, we do on Tower Casuals, which is the Destiny podcast that I host. But yeah, we're going to do retrospective. I'm excited to talk about it. I hope that everybody out there enjoys this because I know Destiny is kind of a daunting game, and a lot of people either are super interested or roll their eyes at it. And so I'm going to try to meet everybody in the middle while I'm talking about it. Just, so, but I just wanted to get that out there that Stray is coming. We needed to change course at the last second. So it's nobody's fault. Just, technology doesn't work sometimes, and people have lives. So, darn lives. Anyways.
Very true.
Hi, Ed.
Hi. So, Destiny. What an interesting game, to say the least. I think this is Bungie's third game. A third IP as a series. I believe. Because I think before Oni was part of
first. It. Well, technically fifth, I guess, but technically Rockstar owns Oni.
Okay.
So yeah, Destiny is Bungie's a strange cat. They've been all around, right? I mean, they've been. I don't even know where to. So Myth is like their first franchise. Well, I guess second, because Marathon I think is their first. Marathon came out in 1994. Myth came out in 1997, and then they did games like Pathway into Darkness, which was like kind of their first foray into first-person shooters, but not very, financially stable. They did a game called Weekend Warrior, which came out in 1997. But their real kind of first breakout success would be Marathon for Mac, because they were owned by Apple, and then Microsoft bought them when they in the middle of their, I mean, Halo was shown off at Macworld
Oh yeah, that is right.
as an RTS, which is why that second level is so huge because it's an RTS map that they scaled down. But yeah, when Microsoft was trying to build the Xbox, they needed they needed in-house development, and so they bought Bungie, and Halo was turned into a first-person shooter, and obviously people know Halo and love that original trilogy specifically, and then Bungie moved on to Destiny, and now this is where we're at. So.
I'll have to ask you like off air, how a bunch of Microsoft split. I think I've never read the story about how they split.
Oh,
Um,
Bungie just wanted to do things other than Halo, and Microsoft just agreed to let them buy themselves out. And as like they had to finish they had 3 Halo games in development that they
mhm.
promised Microsoft, but they had to finish those games for Microsoft in order for them to be allowed to buy. I don't. It's like it's not as interesting as it sounds. It's
Okay.
but yeah, that's why ODST ended up being its own game, right? Instead
Mhm.
of the expansion for Halo 3, which is Halo 3 ODST, Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, and Halo Reach were the 3 games that they finished for Microsoft before moving on. But speaking of ODST, that was where we got our first tease for Destiny. Was down this little alleyway. There was a sign that says Destiny awaits, and it's just a picture of the planet Earth with a little white ball above it. And people were like, "What is this?" Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Can't see it anymore though because it was patched out and it was never put in the Master Chief Collection. So that Easter egg's gone. Actually, I think it might still be on the disc version of ODST if you own it for 360.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that might be that. But yeah, Destiny, it's been going on for a while. I can't believe like the first tease was 15 years ago. 15 years ago in September, in this coming September, Ed.
Yes.
And then the franchise will be 10 years old in September. It's just wild to think about how long I've been playing this dumb game. And I mean, that's baby steps compared to people who are playing like WoW and EverQuest and stuff like that. But in terms of a console MMO slash ongoing game slash game as a service, whatever you want to call them these days, these
Yes.
terms change, but they're all sometimes terms change and they're interchangeable, and sometimes they don't change and then they mean different things. I don't know. It's dumb because you say game as a service, right? But that incorporates all kinds of things. That's Halo, that's Overwatch, that's Fortnite, you know, the Division. They're all different things, but they use that term, and it's just dumb. It's dumb.
Yes.
This whole thing is dumb. Video games are dumb, but they're fun, and that's why we're here to have dumb fun.
Well, before we get into our small summary of Destiny itself, Corey, there's some things you have to mention before we actually get into it.
Yeah. So there are 2 things I need to say, and then we'll get into the housekeeping, and we need to do the housekeeping still. But yeah, so before we get into this, I do have to say that the code was provided to me by Bungie and Sony. I was given the code for the Final Shape and the annual pass for the year. And I am a authorized Bungie creator, hashtag Bungie creator. Sorry, I have to say hashtag Bungie creator. So you can take this discussion about this game as you want. I've been playing Destiny and have had various different feelings over the years, regardless of this, title or privilege or whatever you want to call it. So I just want to be open about it because I think you should be open if you get a code for free when you're talking about it on a podcast or in a review or something. So that said, that I just, should probably say that. And then what was the other thing? Those are the 2 things. Those are the 2 things.
Yes.
It's like 1A, 1B. Right. Okay.
Oh, and to let everybody know that this is not a ad
Oh,
or
right. Yeah,
anything.
because like sometimes when you get codes from a Sony owned studio, you have to mention if it's an ad. So like it's just you should do that anyway. It's kind of the law, but this is not an ad for Destiny. This is just a discussion. But since I was provided the code, and a lot of people that were provided codes have to say that their stuff is an ad or they are doing it for that reason. Um,
Yes.
so just had to put it out there. Anyways, let's continue. Nobody cares about that stuff. It's just
Well,
something I have to mention.
well, let's get into this housekeeping. If you want to, because I'm super excited for this discussion, everybody. So
Ed's
just
stressed
bear
out,
with me.
everybody. Ed's
I'm
afraid I'm going to
not.
yell at him.
Uh,
He's
I'm
afraid I'm going to
gonna.
do this again, which I did
uh,
twice before we started recording.
Um, if you want to support the Boss Rush podcast, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/Boss Rush Network. Subscribing to tiers on our Patreon can grant you perks like the new exclusive pre and post shows, voting rights for Spoilercast and Video Game Book Club, exclusive question threads for Spotlight Podcast, early access to After Dark, and more. As always, though, your viewership and listenership is enough for us. Subscribe to the Boss Rush Network on YouTube and like this video. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or even if you don't, leave us a rating and a nice review on those platforms. You can find all of our banters, features, listicles, reviews, and more on our website, bossrush.com.
Nope.
Bossrush.net.
Wow, Ed. Wow. You're really providing me some editing points here tonight, aren't you?
Look,
I'm
that
so glad this doesn't have to be posted in 12 hours.
good googly moogly. Well, bossrush.net, everybody. So thank you very much. So Corey, Destiny, just give a small summary of what Destiny is.
Wow, where do I start with that, Ed? It's not a small question. Basically, since its inception, it's basically a massively multiplayer first-person shooter with has really kind of evolved into more of an RPG disguised as a first-person shooter over the last 5 years or so. You play as a space magic wielder wizard that can come back to life. But yeah, basically, like it's an MMO first person shooter where you can wield special powers provided to you called the light, and you're fighting the darkness. This is just the basic setup. Obviously, it gets more complicated throughout the series, but basically, that's what you're doing. It's the basic story, like the literal basic story of light versus dark. There's a lot of lore and a lot of history that goes into this game. I have 7 lore books over there, 2 art books with lore in it. All the collector's editions have lore books in them. Like, there are very interesting stories about all kinds of characters. Kind of the game, the series kind of centers around, the last city on Earth, which is located in an old cosmodrome in old Russia. And you kind of learn about all these enemy factions as you move forward and kind of learn about why they are doing what they're doing. And it's really strange because Destiny tackles a lot of different things that we kind of frown upon, right? Like, tackles racism and classism, and it tackles LGBTQ themes, and because 2 of the main stories going on right now in the Final Shape and this new episode that just came out called Echoes centers around these characters, Osiris and Saint 14, who are partners, and it's like, they're very prominent characters in the Destiny community or in the Destiny universe, and they're gay, which, when people, when part of the player base found out that we're enraged because nobody has anything else better to be mad about. And then kind of the main character of, the story probably moving forward is Micah 10, who is a transgender exo. And that's very, these kind of themes kind of run throughout the series, right? It's not just now, it's been there since the beginning. Kind of revolves around the Vanguard, who are the governing body of the last city, with Commander Zavala being the head, Ikora being his right hand, which is the Warlock Vanguard, and then Cade 6, who is the Hunter Vanguard, and they kind of are the governing body of the tower and the last city. And the tower is kind of like the focal point of the last city. And then you have all these side characters like Lord Saladin and Lord Shax, who are kind of the multiplayer vendor type people, and Eris Morn. It kind of goes into all these things, but basically you kind of interact with all these characters, and in the beginning you kind of don't really know why you're interacting with them. And I think some, even after the Final Shape, would argue that those first 2 years are kind of worthless in Destiny, to a point. And then, you start learning all these things and how these characters interact with each other and their backstories. And you see your, villains kind of become allies or anti-heroes. And, once we get to the Final Shape, the enemy of my enemy is my friend type thing. And you kind of have to do things that you don't expect. And it's a really, for a multiplayer centric game, it is a very story and lore heavy game. Every weapon you have has a piece of lore attached to it. Every piece of armor you find has a piece of lore attached to it. Every character has grimoire. In Destiny 1, they had these things called grimoire cards that you collected, that had different lore pieces. I think there's over 700 or 800 of them that you can collect. It's just a fascinating world to be involved in, even if you're not a hardcore player, because the lore and the stories are so fascinating. The characters are very interesting. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of Destiny in a nutshell. Obviously, we're going to go over 9 of the 10 years in a kind of an overview thing, and then we'll go into the Final Shape. But I don't know. Destiny has been a big part of, my life for the last decade. And Ed, I know you've played not nearly as much as I have, but you've been playing off and on for, the better part of, the whatever, however many years, 8, 9, 10 years. So
so speaking of history of Destiny, I actually played it on. I played the PS3 version.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the first DLC came out. I think it was by the second one they stopped doing the PS3 version.
So,
or it might have been or it might have been the Taken King, because I think I got the Taken King.
The Taken King came out on PS3, and that was the last major expansion that came out.
Okay.
Because it was, when Vanilla Destiny came out, they had 2 minor expansions called The Dark Below and The House of Wolves, and those both came out on PS3. And then the Taken King came out on PS3, and everybody was like, I can't believe this game is running on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, because it was I mean, theoretically, yes, it can, because it was running on the Halo Reach engine, but like just building a world, multiple worlds that size, and multiple, having multiple players engaged in the same space, and instancing people into, you have like the public space, and then as you progress, you kind of seamlessly instance into another space, depending on what kind of mission or quest or strike or whatever kind of in-game activity you're doing, or story campaign you're doing. So it's very weird and seamless and cool that they can do that. And yeah, it's cool. They do a
I,
good job.
I know I ended up switching to Xbox One
Hmm.
um for the Taken King DLC. Like I got the game and all the content that was up to there because at Toys R Us we were kind of closing and it was getting rid of that game. So
Hmm.
I was able to get a copy like for cheap and play that version. I think 2 was all about to come out around that time we was closing. But yeah, I my first initial thoughts of Destiny 1 just does like it was it felt very slow. But it was kind of fun for a bit. I think I started having problems with it um because they didn't really give you like a breakdown. It kind of felt like you had to learn the game on your own, which was kind of new to me in a sense for a first person shooter. Normally at during that time when Destiny came out, a lot of the games were, of course we didn't have instruction booklets. They were tutoring you to learn how to play the game. So they was giving you instructions and things like that. And it kind of felt like with Destiny, you kind of got thrown in to stuff like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's I remember Destiny 1 because I started playing at the alpha, which was like, I don't know, not really an alpha, but they called it an alpha, right? In like
mhm.
20, I guess it was 2014. I thought it was earlier than that, but I looked it up. It was like the summer of 2014 um, that the alpha came out. I thought it was like, because Halo's betas used to come out like a year before the game did, right? And so
Yeah.
they can make adjustments. I thought Bungie was gonna. I thought, man, I really thought that was the case, but it was 2014 that summer. They released that kind of alpha, which was the Earth missions, and then that first mission on the moon, I think, was the alpha, and then they had some multiplayer stuff in there, and because they had that big moon map in the alpha with
Hmm.
the moon vehicles that they released with Destiny 1, and then they ended up taking it out because it was too big, and the vehicles didn't never worked how they wanted them to. And they've ended up taking vehicles pretty much out of the game except for your Sparrow. And I think you can still get pikes, which are the fallen kind of weaponized uh kind of air speeder type things. But other than that, I think Destiny is pretty much done with vehicles. They haven't, which is crazy because you think of Halo and that's all you think about are the vehicles, right? You think of the
Vehicles.
Ghosts, you think of the Banshees, you think of
Yeah.
obviously the Warthog and the Mongoose ATV, and you just think of all these things. And Destiny just never had them, which was crazy to think about at that time. So, but yeah, they kind of I think Bungie really kind of relied on you knowing a that you've played Halo before, right?
Yes.
And because they're Destiny feels like a very natural evolution of where Halo 3 should have gone if they did Halo 3, right? In terms of the shooting and the movement, right? It's very
Hmm.
fluid. They added the sprint, which was nice. The guns feel really good. Uh, the shooting feels impactful. This really feels like the natural evolution of Halo. I guess Halo Reach, because it's funny. It's that Destiny is still running on some form of the Halo Reach engine, which is
Insane.
mind-boggling that they're doing that. Which is why a lot of these updates kind of take so long. And they've really doubled down on the engineering aspect and kind of fixed those issues, right? But like,
Yeah.
man, the fact that this is still running on that engine is like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
I think a lot of the updates and the retooling of that engine allows them to um be able to use it, and because like it would I feel feeling that it would have taken Bungie a long time just to build a new engine for this game.
Well, they rebuilt it at some point, which is why in Destiny 2 they had the content vault where they took out a lot of stuff. Remember that big mess where they took out, the base campaign and the Forsaken campaign, which I would argue the Forsaken campaign is the most important piece of this story, which we'll get there. But the engine really had a massive overhaul, and they couldn't port everything over to this engine and keep the file size down, right?
Yeah.
And so they started really piecemealing this thing out, and we'll get to this later, but there have been some rumors. I don't know how valid they are. I always take a Destiny campaign rumor with a grain of salt, but there has been some mention of a streamlined version of, once these first 3 episodes are over, of a streamlined version of the Destiny 1 campaign in its entirety, which would be, Destiny 1, Crotazen, or Dark Below, House of Wolves, Taken King, Rise of Iron. That campaign streamlined into like a very Halo-esque campaign, right? Mm-hmm. Streamlined, simplified, changed, a little bit, so you're not like setting up patrol zones or, running strikes during these things, maybe a strike or two, right, just to get your feet wet. But the biggest thing about Destiny is the onboarding at this point. It's just terrible. The new light experience is terrible. The kind of 5 mission catch up campaign thing that they did after that is pretty terrible, although you get a pretty good gun after that, so it's kind of worth doing. They hit like a major story beat from each of the campaigns that are missing, which is not great. And they kind of throw you literally into the 3rd chapter of this story they're telling, with Shadowkeep. And Shadowkeep is arguably the worst campaign maybe ever that they've ever put out, in terms of a major expansion. I would say that campaign lies solely with Curse of Osiris at this point. But Destiny has been a mess. It's been such a train wreck and such a awe-inspiring wonder at the same time, and I don't know if there's really any type of, man, Riley is just running around up there. It's just this franchise that has just been kicking, and I mean, nobody's ever done something like this really before in a first-person shooter, right? I mean,
yes,
like I said, our previous examples were Final Fantasy XI, World of Warcraft, EverQuest, stuff like that. So the onboarding process is just terrible for Destiny, which, is, I guess it's it's not good, right? Because people want to jump in, and with the Final Shape being really highly reviewed, people have been asking me if it's worth jumping in now, and I'm like, well, if you don't care about the story, or you're willing to put in the work to catch up on some of the story that's missing, then sure, Destiny is probably the best it's ever been.
Yes,
especially with Prismatic kind of being this super customizable build crafting style, subclass, and then the episodes kind of being a new jump on point, but like they're still part of the Final Shape, and the Final Shape is still the end of the 10-year saga they've been telling. So
yes,
it's a hard game to get into at this point, if you are going to be in it for the story and the characters. I will say Destiny 1 is still playable in its entirety. I don't think the Red War would be worth. My biggest thing is that Forsaken is missing, and that's the most important campaign in the entire series in terms of this, how the story progresses and where it goes. That's kind of like the one you circle at, where I would say, I would say that that's kind of like the end of the like from Destiny 1 to Forsaken is like, you know, where one part ends and one begins, and then Forsaken through the Final Shape is where the next part starts and ends, right? Because
Yes.
Forsaken you have to know who Cade 6 is, right? And care about Cade to understand the importance of that. But then you also have to understand who Aldrin is and kind of his path through the rest of the series. And so that's kind of like, it's just from a gameplay perspective, Destiny is definitely worth getting into at this point if you're into shooters and MMO style games. If you want the story, you're gonna have to put in the work to catch up.
Yeah, I know for me, I think definitely I could say the story has been over my head.
Mm-hmm.
Um for Destiny 1. And the reason why I think it was the way that the story was told. Like they had cutscenes, you hear the voiceovers and things like that. But if you really wanted to get into it, you had to go to Bungie.net and read a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
that was something new and different for me. I think it was because I'm such a single player gamer. Playing this multiplayer like 3-person team game. Um, I think I just couldn't catch on to a lot of story parts in it because it felt like it was jumping around in the first one, and like
It does.
you
I
would
mean,
be
it does. It totally does. Until you get to the Taken King, the story jumps
mhm.
around a lot.
Yeah, so it's yeah, and definitely with I think you had to keep flying to different planets for missions and the worlds where they were open in a sense, but you were still on a linear path. So it was kind of weird with me. And then I know I've said this many a times. I actually didn't like Destiny 1. Um and it was more of the fact of it being the way that the level design was set up. You would get into some fights. If you died, you would like be able to respawn. But if you got to a point where it kind of locked you out from respawning, and what I mean by that is like if you die, regardless of where you're at in that mission, if you're playing as a solo person, you have to redo all of that over. So fights could take a while, but it actually depend on how much your gear was, like at the level, and how much your gun was at in the game. So like Bungie expected you really to play this game with 2 other people. Like they
Mm-hmm.
really expected you to play it as a online team, but
Yeah.
they forgot to think about what if we have a single player.
Well, it wasn't
If
built as a single player game, and
mhm.
that's not what it's for. And we could have that conversation for the next hour, and I don't really want to have that, right?
Oh
But
no, right, but
I do think Destiny 2, you know, really made that single player experience more cohesive,
yeah,
especially I would say I want to say
I would
Beyond
say
Light,
for
but I would say I want to say Beyond Light, but it's really like, yeah, Forsaken was good at it. The D1 or the D2 Red War campaign, the first one that they
mm,
took out, is was pretty decent as a
yeah,
single player experience, right? I mean, I think you had to play the entire first like 3 or 4 missions by yourself anyway,
yeah.
just because of the whole, losing your light and finding your power type thing.
I would say
The
like just the demo itself gave you an idea of what they were going with
mhm.
from it. Because that demo, I think the demo was the first like level
Yeah, Homecoming.
of
Yeah.
of the game, and it really felt just good in his execution. Be like, oh,
Hmm.
this feels like a redesign,
It
and
felt like a
so
Halo. It felt like a Halo level. Like
yeah,
it feels like that the opening of Halo 1 where you like get out of the cryo tube and the I almost said the elixir, the the Covenant are attacking spaceport and you are trying to escape, right?
Yes.
That's what it feels. That's what Homecoming feels like. Is like, and that's kind of what it is, right? The Cabal, the Red Legion are here. They're here to try to steal the light from the Traveler because they think, Gaul thinks he deserves it, and
Yes.
um, they've launched a surprise attack on the last city, and everybody was thrown off guard. The tower is destroyed. They steal the light from the Guardians, and the whole story is about bringing the light back to the Guardians, right? And
Yes.
that's a great story to tell as a single player experience. And I know I'm I know I'm very in the minority of this. I think we both are, but I actually really liked the Red War campaign.
I did too.
Minus a few things. Like there's a mission where you have to set up patrol points, which is really stupid. I mean, it makes sense when they're telling the story, but it's really a stupid mission. And there's a couple other things that I don't remember because it was 7 years ago. But I think Gaul was a terrifying villain,
Yes.
very Darth Vader esque, and
His fight,
Forsaken.
his boss fight was really balanced. That's what I
Uh-huh.
liked about it. It was like really balanced and I
Yeah.
think that's why I think I like the single player in the first campaign for Destiny 2 is that it really felt balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the first time
Well, you have to think about it this way too: is like a lot of people were jumping in Destiny 2 for the first time without ever playing Destiny 1.
yeah,
You had a whole new platform in PC who never played Destiny 1 theoretically, unless were a console player and just moved to PC for some reason.
yeah,
And so I think they wanted to make that campaign feel like an avenue that people could jump in and feel like, okay, I'm not very familiar with the way Destiny works. At least give them a campaign that they feel like they can progress through.
mm.
And I think it worked really well. And I think Forsaken did a pretty decent job of that too,
And I think this is when me and you jumped to Xbox for Destiny 2.
well,
Because
I had Xbox characters on Destiny 1 because this was before it was cross play, and I had
yeah,
friends playing on Destiny 1 on Xbox, and then I had friends playing on PlayStation, and I was trying to keep up with both, and it was
we're both.
very impossible. So I ended up like the PlayStation team was like the Fall Guys because there weren't very many updates, right?
Yeah.
And then the Xbox players were like the spring and summer guys. Summer guys,
All I know is that PlayStation 4 controller for Destiny 2, when I played it, I was like, oh, this is crippling my arms. I started playing the Xbox One version. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to give it this on Xbox because
Yeah, well,
that controller felt so comfortable.
yeah, well, I mean, in terms of controllers, like the Xbox One controller is way better for shooters, right? And I think,
Mm-hmm.
not to, not that we're always talking about Nintendo, you and I, but like I think they made the smart decision of going with the Xbox route, especially like if they're gonna, Splatoon is pretty big, and Metroid Prime it looks to be pretty big. And so if Nintendo is experimenting with some shooters, I think that makes a lot of sense to go that way. But
Yes.
PlayStation is, the sticks on the same level instead of the staggered sticks is like not ideal for shooters. It's ideal for platformers and third person action games, which is what Sony specializes in. And so,
Yes.
Man, I remember the rumor that the DualSense was actually going to have staggered sticks, and people were freaking out on both sides.
So
But
weird.
anyways, yeah, Destiny 1, that whole kind of story was very vanilla, no pun intended. I don't even know if there was really a true story to that game until like the last act of the vanilla campaign and into the Dark Below and the House of Wolves. And then when the Taken King came out, right, they kind of reshuffled the 3 previous campaigns into one campaign, which I think was smart. It made a lot more sense, right? Because you said there was a lot of jumping around, especially in year 1 of like, oh well, I did these missions. They're talking about this character named Crota. Who the heck is Crota? And then you go to Venus and do the Vex missions, and you're like, well, what happened to this guy named Crota? and then the Dark Below is all about Crota, and so they really streamlined that, and like kind of put the missions in an order where it made sense, right? Like the House of Wolves missions kind of go with the Fallen missions that you do in the vanilla campaign. The Cabal missions kind of go with the Cabal mission. They really like reorganized it in a way that
Mm-hmm.
made sense. Story still wasn't great, but it made sense at least. And I think it was something necessary they had to do for when the Taken King came out, which is like probably it's still looked at as like a top 3 or 4 campaign in all of Destiny, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I have softened on the Taken King campaign quite a bit since in the last couple of years, especially since the Witch Queen came out for Destiny 2. But the nostalgia for me is there, which is weird to talk about nostalgia in Destiny at this point. But I mean, it's 10 years, so I guess you do have it. But the Taken King, like, it had the best raid, in my opinion. It has the best location in Destiny 1. It definitely has the best story in Destiny 1. When Oryx kind of comes in, who's like, the big bad and the father of Crota, who you killed in Crota's end raid. And, from a very surface level thing, that whole story is about a father coming to take his son's revenge, like avenge his son's death, I guess is what you would
Mm-hmm.
say, while also trying to take over the universe. He destroys an entire race in the Awoken, which is, you see the blue people in Destiny. Those are the Awoken, who are like a darkness infused, risen race of human that were banned for a while during, at some point. Um, and you have the Exos, who are the robots. Those are the robot people who are still technically human. It's like a human consciousness in a robot body. We're exploring that right now in Echoes right now with because they're infused with Vex. We call it Vex milk, the white liquid that the Vex kind of ooze out instead of blood, and
Mm-hmm.
darkness. And so they're playing with that a little bit this episode, and it's really interesting. But the Vex are the robot race, the bad robot race. um, and then the Cabal are like the war space rhinoceroses, like that are like a real military kind of Roman Empire esque uh, civilization. They're
Boy, do they take
conquerors
some?
and
They
military.
took some hits.
Yeah. But essentially, and then like the Fallen are a race known as the Elixni, who were the previous light wielders, I guess you would say, and then the Traveler, quote unquote, abandoned them in their catastrophic event they call the Whirlwind. Um, it's all super fascinating stuff, but this is also all stuff that's not in the game. You just kind of have to read the lore and learn about it
Yeah.
as you go. And you do learn about a lot of it later in Destiny 2, right? They do kind of backtrack, and Mithrax and Aramis is kind of their fallen Kells, which Kell is like their term for king, and they lead their own houses. Right, the houses is like their own kind of tribe, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
Um, it's all very, very fascinating. Uh, but you don't learn any of this until like partway through Destiny 2. I would say Forsaken is like where you really start learning of having the lore being infused into the storyline of the game,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just something that you have to go look up because you're like, oh, this character is named, but you've never seen him before, and you kill him and then you never hear about him again. Let's go read about him. Like in Destiny 1, remember that first Archon priest you fight after you find your ship in
Yeah.
Destiny 1? Like, it's literally like the second or third mission, and you
Yeah.
fight that Archon priest with like the horned helmet thing. That
Yeah.
character is really important in the lore, like pre-Destiny. And like you just kill him and then you never hear about him again. There's a $500 statue of that character that you can buy right now that's like 3 feet
Oh,
tall.
wow.
It's like, in like, you don't learn more about that character until later in Destiny 2, and at that point you probably have forgotten or didn't even play Destiny 1. It's a mess, right? But uh so going through Destiny 1 and getting to Destiny 2 is just if look, Destiny 1 is was playing through those campaigns is definitely worth doing if you want to put in the time. They made the leveling a lot easier. You can get tokens that level you up to level 40, which is the max level, and then all you have to do is worry about your light level or power level.
Which I gotta ask, is the first Destiny free, or you still have to pay for it?
The first
Yeah,
Destiny?
yeah.
No, the collection is still $60
Okay,
for Destiny 1. So that's all 5 campaigns, I guess, is $60.
okay. Yeah, I did. I know they made the Destiny 2 free down the
Um,
line. I just didn't know if they actually went and did it for the first game.
yeah. So Destiny 2 is technically free to play. Um, but it's only the New Light experience, the New Light campaign, and some multiplayer stuff. And then you can get the exotics that were from the Red War campaign. That's all that's available for free, which is fine. There's some pretty good weapons in there. There's some pretty Crucible's fun if you don't care about being, competitive. It's fun. You get access to all 3 of the light classes, which is nice. You don't get access to any of the darkness classes,
Mm-hmm.
um, because you have to buy those campaigns to get access to those subclasses because they're integral to the story and whatever. But Destiny 2 is technically free to start. It does do a better job of introducing you to mission structure, quest structure. It introduces you to all the vendors in the tower now, which, all the different game modes have different vendors. So competitive multiplayer has their own vendor with Lord Shaxx. The Vanguard Ops used to be the Strike playlist. Now it's called Vanguard Ops. Has Zavala, who's the commander. You level up your light subclasses through Ikora down in the bazaar. Hawthorne is up. If you want to join a clan, you can go to Hawthorne and kind of get your clan stuff there. The Drifter is the Gambit PvPvE game mode vendor. So it does a good job of introducing you to all the vendors. The Gunsmith, who you can purchase weapons from, or bounties, or upgrade materials from. They introduce you to everybody, which is nice in terms
Yes.
of because that's something Destiny 1 really never did until after the Taken King came out. But the New Light experience is very bad. It's not very good. Shahan, the character that leads you through the New Light experience, is the worst character in Destiny. And he looks like, you see how cool a lot of the NPCs look. Like Cade looks super cool, and Crow
Yeah.
looks cool, and Ikora looks cool with her long cape, right? And Osiris looks cool with his kind of like his falcon helmet type thing going on. And
Uh.
Zavala is Zavala, right? And then you get Shahan, he's basically like someone doing a very bad cosplay of a guardian. uh, Wearing one of the worst exotics for hunters, by the way.
Oh wow.
The Ahamkara, I forget what they're called for hunters. I don't really play as a hunter. But then they also kind of they don't really teach you about any of the classes either, which is bad. I mean, they kind of do on the title screen now. They have a little description of what each class is, but they
Yeah.
don't do a great job of, obviously, there's only so much you can do when you're going through to pick your class, but Titan is obviously more of the Halo Spartan type character, kind of takes a lot of damage, gives a lot of damage, doesn't really do a lot of, other things, right? The Hunter is more of the scout, agile, stealthy sniper type character. Has a lot of abilities that help with that aspect of the game, but takes doesn't it they don't take a lot of damage. And then the Warlock is the mage type character, a lot of magical enhancement powers. Like they have a really powerful melee attack that's pretty ranged actually.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's charged, they have the healing rift, they have the empowering rift, they have those types of things. So it is worth doing a little bit of research if you want to jump in on these classes, which ones you want to do. I like the Titan. I also think we make fun of the Warlocks a lot in the Discord, but I actually like the Warlock a lot. I almost wish I would have played as a Warlock at some point. I actually might go back now and play through as a Warlock on the campaigns that are left still, because the prismatic subclass for the Warlock is pretty insane, I hear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have any interest in playing in as a hunter, which is fine because they're, like something like 62% of the Destiny community plays as a hunter main.
Me.
Which is sure. Go ahead.
I know cause only reason why I played as hunter, because I actually thought that it's just like a default class, just like a regular,
Yeah.
class, and
Mm-hmm.
because I like the shooting in Destiny and try to get enemies' energy life bar down and like destroy them quicker. I always say that I play it like Contra sometimes. I feel like the hunter gives me that.
Well, if you want to play it like Contra,
While
you should
being
have played as a
speedy.
Titan.
You know what? I did play as a Titan, and I think I went back to hunter. I know I have.
There's literally a chess piece called the Axiom War Rig, and
Uh-huh.
they literally have a Gatling gun, and you pair those two together, and you have a Gatling gun with pretty much unlimited ammo. If you want to play like because it like reloads your assault rifles and your submachine guns,
yeah,
and provide, like, it enhances those weapons specifically. And also there's this aspect that you can add that, like, your barrier also enhances your reloads and your weapon, like the weapons you carry. So like you pair those three together and you're just like this walking tank, like this
take
walking Gatling gun type of
and
thing.
and that's what I think Titan is. Titan to me is
Mm-hmm.
like the tank of the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah,
For me.
I actually play Titan. So there's a pretty important subclass of Titan called the Sentinel Titan, and part of that is the what we lovingly call the Bubble Titan, which is a support
Yeah,
Titan, and it grants you pop a bubble for these things called Armor of Light and Weapons of Light, and then it gives everybody an overshield, and it empowers everybody's weapons by, like, I don't know, 15 or 20%, something ridiculous, while you have this buff from this. And so that's kind of the
yeah,
role that I've played for a long time, really since the Taken King, actually. And I haven't really deviated much from that. Like, I play around with the other subclasses, but that's like the one I'm most comfortable with. If I'm playing by myself, I'll play with other subclasses, but you know, getting into the Final Shape and Prismatic really changed the way that I approached Destiny, and allowed me to play as a more aggressive character. Because the one thing about Prismatic that people kind of complain about, and I've kind of not complained about it, but I hope they add in the future, is like there's no support um, characteristics to this subclass at all. There's no like healing anything. Like,
yeah,
the Solar Titan has the healing grenades that you can kind of throw down and heal people with. Sentinel Titan has the bubble. The all the subclasses have some sort of support, or all the classes have some sort of support aspect to them, in one way or another. And Prismatic does not have any support anywhere. So it has allowed me to experiment and be more aggressive, and I think maybe that's why I've enjoyed this a lot more too, is because I've been playing it differently, because the game is encouraging me to play differently.
yeah. I know. For me, it's just like if I could get some distance and hide,
Mhm.
or I could see the enemies and attack them, but they can't attack me back. like definitely that's when my sniper comes out, because like my sniper for bosses definitely to
Mhm.
get the headshot when they seeing that big yellow number. I usually do a lot of that so I can kind of get get the fight done with a little
Yeah.
bit quicker. But I definitely with the final shape, um, there are some encounters where it's really like you have to move. If you don't move,
Hmm.
you're dead. And at times it'd be like, okay, I definitely need some people to come and help me
Yeah.
with this, because there are just some fights that you just like, okay, teamwork. I need that. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. There's definitely. I mean, they definitely want you to play with other people, but there are
Mm-hmm.
other like you know the final shape, which we'll get into in maybe like 10 minutes or so, because I do kind of want to go over the story as a whole before we get there.
Yeah.
We're definitely not going to dive deep into the storylines because there's just 10 years of storylines is a lot, especially when you add like Destiny to every expansion of Destiny 2 also has 4 seasons of storylines, so which have their own mini campaigns that you play.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't really want to dive into all of that because we'd be here for 75 hours. Um, but I do want to talk about the final shape in depth a little bit. Uh,
Well,
most
Corey, you wanna get into the rundown of Destiny 1 to 2 to the final shape?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just gonna give a brief kind of summary, I guess, of the story leading up to the final shape, just so people have some what of an idea of what I'm talking about who don't play Destiny. So Destiny one, Destiny one through the Taken King. Basically, the first character you meet actually is Ghost, the little robot kind of companion that you carry around. That has a lot of aspects of the game tied to it, like traveling to your ship or the tower, or bringing up your menus and everything. Like Ghost is doing all of that for you. Ghost, the Ghost resurrects you. So Guardians are humans or awoken, I guess, to that have passed on, and the ghosts are uh, they are part of the traveler, and they decide which people who have passed on are worthy of wielding the light, right? And so when Ghost finds you, Ghost resurrects you, and Ghost is trying to get you to the last city, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
the whole goal of the first mission of Destiny 1. You go and you find your ship and you go to the last city, and that's that, right? Um, and so you get to the last city, you meet a character called the Speaker, who um, can talk. He says he speaks for the traveler, and he can kind of, sort of get an idea of what the traveler is doing for society, right? The traveler is the big white ball that hangs over the earth, right? And has life bearing powers, and which is why guardians can, once they die, they can resurrect, and are basically immortal until if something happens to your ghost, you obviously become mortal, and can't wield the light anymore. But essentially, guardians are immortal because of what the traveler can offer.
Mm-hmm.
And they've offered, the traveler has offered all kinds of things for the guardians, including the powers, the magical powers that we call the light, which comes in the form of 3 subclasses: void, arc, which is like a lightning kind of power, and then solar, which is self-explanatory, I guess, flame, fire type
Yeah.
subclass. And so you are on a mission to kind of uh, there's basically 3 major things you experience in Destiny 1 vanilla. There is the uh, the fallen disruption in old Russia, which is where you kind of wake up, which is where you're resurrected. which doesn't really pan out to be anything at the moment because you are interrupted by the hive, which are like the bug, skeletal bug looking
Yeah.
race. Um, and you end up investigating that instead on Earth, and then it takes you to the moon. And so you end up investigating this thing on the moon with the hive, which ends up being Crota's rise to power. He is a hive, pretty much a hive god in training, is the best way to put it. Um, he is a powerful being. He uh, is an ascendant hive, which is it can go between our realm and something called the ascendant realm, which we'll get to later because it plays a bigger part in the story later. But basically, it's like another place where they can kind of live and be exist, So, um, and then there you have to investigate this cabal kind of collective on Mars, um, which is something that also doesn't really pan out to be anything because you have to also the cabal are investigating something on Mars as well, uh, which actually has to do with the Vex, the robot race. And so while you're on Venus, you're investigating what the Vex are doing there. And you find out that the Vex are a hive mind collective being controlled by one entity that you don't know who it is. We kind of know who it is now, but we'll save that. You don't really know who it is, and you're being kind of watched / guided by this character called the Stranger, the Exo Stranger. And so this investigation with the Vex is probably the most important piece of Destiny 1 that you need to, kind of follow up on. And you end up on Mars investigating the Vex, and you get to this place called the Black Garden, and you get to the Black Heart, which nobody really understood what it was until Lightfall came out. So the Vex are trying to simulate a version of the darkness and the light, because the Vex are all about simulations and seeing what the ultimate simulation is for them to survive and become the ultimate race in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
That's their whole thing. That's the entire first raid as well. Vault of Glass is like this time manipulation that the Vex are going through, and Atheon is their kind of, I would say, leader, but they're all a collective hive mind, so I don't really know how you want to talk about that. But Vault of Glass is a great raid. We'll get to the raids later, but and then the Dark Below is all about taking down Crota, which is the, like I said earlier, this massive hive god in training. And then House of Wolves is about Skolas, which is something that you were originally investigating, the Fallen in Destiny 1. It's original campaign. This is kind of where that pays off. And Skolas is aiming to bring the Fallen together under one house. And you have to stop him from gathering them all, I guess. I don't know. It's not very, like I said, it's not very fleshed out unless you read the lore. You bring up Skolas to any Destiny player. Skolas, all they're going to tell you is that Skolas was a pain in the ass, that encounter in Prison of Elders. That's all they're going to tell you. Because they're like, you literally don't know anything else about him because he sucks. The story really becomes relevant when the Taken King comes around and Oryx comes to avenge his son Crota's death, with Crota's two sisters. And basically your whole thing is to avenge the Awoken army that he kind of obliterated with his ship, the Dreadnought, which is where the whole campaign kind of takes place is the
See
Dreadnought.
this.
Um, it's kind of like this Death Star type ship. Well, that's the easiest way to compare it. And you have to stop Oryx, and you end up killing Oryx, but he ends up going to the Ascendant Plane before he dies. Really dies, I guess. Uh, but he has the ability to um, this thing. He has the ability to take, um, which is he has the ability to control, bring enemies into the Ascendant Realm and control like shadow versions of themselves as his army and wield them as his army. Um, and so that's that campaign. And you kind of have to take him down, and the King's Fall raid is the kind of culmination of that, which is the best raid. Oh my gosh, it has the best puzzles. It has the best encounters, in my opinion. Granted, I haven't done all the raids, mostly because of time at this point. But and then the Rise of Iron is all about the history of the Iron Lords, which is cool. Doesn't really have anything to do with the main story of Destiny as a whole, but it is an interesting kind of, sub story, I guess. You learn about the Iron Lords and how they disappeared, and basically the Fallen have entered this area called the Plague Lands to use this forbidden technology called Siva, which is like a nanotechnology that became very out of control, and this whole area of Earth has just been quarantined because this is where they've kind of locked this technology away. So it's pretty cool. And then, like I said, Destiny 2, we've kind of already gotten into a lot of it. Like the Red War campaign is all about the Cabal kind of the Red Legion of the Cabal surprise attacking the tower. And
before you go, the Black Heart was was that the final boss in Destiny 1?
It is the final arena in Destiny 1. You fight these Vex kind of there's three kind of massive Vex Minotaurs that you fight. One represents the past, one represents the present, and one represents the future. And they are all trying to, I don't really know what they're doing with the Black Heart. I could look it up, but basically the Black Heart is that big black orb in the middle.
Yeah.
And that is so the Black Heart is the Vex kind of simulation of what we later learned to be called the Veil, which we'll get into that later. You learn all about that in Lightfall, sort of. So we talked about the Red War campaign, which is a fairly straightforward campaign. It really doesn't have a lot to do with the future of Destiny, but it's a pretty solid kind of, the Red Legion broke off from the Cabal Empire and their Emperor Keitel, or not Keitel, what's his name? Callus, right? Who kind of controls the Royal Legion. And Callus you later learn, is a disciple of the Witness, who is the big bad of the Light and Dark saga, which you find out in the Witch Queen, who the Witness finally is, right? You kind of know there's this lingering big bad, but you don't know who it is or what they look like or where they're from or whatever, right? And so each kind of campaign kind of sets up a different, almost like a different disciple or a different character that the Witness wants to be a disciple. So Forsaken is about Aldrin, and his the whole campaign revolves around him killing Cade, which is the face of the franchise. Up to that point, Cade is essentially the face of the franchise. I would argue Cade is still probably the face of the franchise, almost. A lot has happened in between then and now, but like, you download the free-to-play version, Cade is front and center on that free-to-play version. And it's like, well, okay.
Because which cutscene, which it might have been the Forsaken one DLC. That's when they kind of started doing the cutscene stuff for like trailers. Because Cade was in one of them predominantly.
Cade was in
Um,
the Destiny 2 one with the drink, like the drink and talking about the game.
okay,
Or I mean, Cade being murdered was in the trailer for Forsaken.
okay,
That was
yeah.
the whole marketing around that campaign. Was the first mission Cade gets murdered? Like that's the whole crux of the storyline.
Because he has that fight. He's fighting all of
Yeah,
those enemies,
with
and
Petra.
then yeah, uh, yeah, that was kind of like the big surprise, like because people didn't expect that to happen
Well,
to
they
Cade.
did. That was the whole marketing thing. That like that's how they introduced what the next expansion was Cade getting murdered, like a year before, like 6 months before it came out.
Well, I don't know. Was it ever planned that people
Yeah,
knew about it? Oh, okay.
yeah, that
I
was
didn't know. I
that was the literal marketing beat. Was Cade gets murdered, and the whole campaign revolves around avenging Cade's death. That was the whole
okay.
marketing thing. But the surprise out of that campaign was that Aldrin, who you learn as the Queen of the Awoken, Queen Mara, she's a pretty relevant character. A lot of Destiny fans are thirsty for Queen Mara, we'll say. Leave it at that. Um, and Aldrin is her brother, who has his own schemes and his own plans. And so he is corrupted by the darkness, right? And
Mm.
pursues a he pursues his own path, right? And the whole thing of Aldrin in Forsaken is that the campaign ends with him being killed by nobody really knows if it's you or Petra. Petra Venge is the queen's right hand uh, guard. She has a cool eye patch. She has a cool weapon. But yeah, but the whole thing about Aldrin is that less than a year later, usually it takes hundreds and thousands of years hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years or more for a guardian to be resurrected by their ghost.
Yes.
This is less than 6 months later. Aldrin is resurrected as a guardian. And the whole thing about guardians is that they don't know anything about their past once they're resurrected. They don't know who they were unless they have so the Bray sisters, for example,
Hmm.
are both guardians. Well, Elsie is not really a guardian anymore, but um, they had their Clovis Bray name tags on them when they were resurrected. So that's how they know who they were. And then they went into the research thing and found out who they were in their previous life or whatever. It's very rare for a guardian to know who they were in their previous life. Nobody knows anything about anybody's past in the story so far. But everybody knows who Aldrin is, and everybody knows that Aldrin killed Cade. Well, now Aldrin is dead, but is resurrected as a guardian, and he calls himself Crow. And
Yes.
so the whole kind of lead up to Shadowkeep and its seasons were, how are they going to address that Crow is a guardian now, or that Aldrin is a guardian now, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody knows who Crow is, or everybody knows who Aldrin is. Everybody knows Crow's past as Aldrin.
That was a big revelation.
That was one of the big.
When
That
it
was one of the
happened.
big story beats, right?
Hmm.
Was when so Osiris was, you and Osiris were the first to find out that Aldrin was Crow, right? And the whole thing was being kept a secret, right? And to the point where like Crow was brought back to the tower and he had to wear a mask. So nobody would know who he was. All
Hmm.
anybody knew is that he was a guardian and he was an awoken and that he was a new light. That's all anybody knew, right? So there's this huge revelation, not quite in Shadowkeep, but I think in Beyond Light, that first kind of season would be Season of the Risen, um, where you kind of are fighting off Keitel, the Empress of the Cabal Empire, who has kind of taken over for her father, who has kind of gone off to be a disciple to the Witness, and she hates him for that. Um, you're kind of trying to show the Guardians are trying to show their worth to Keitel to try to have her become an ally, and the Cabal to become an ally to the Guardians in their fight against the darkness and trying to figure out who the Witness is and everything, right? Well, there are double agents on her team, and the biggest revelation is when Zavala finds out who Crow is and doesn't so Zavala, they try to assassinate Zavala and his ghost, right? These double agents, and Crow takes a bullet or takes a dive for Zavala, and in doing so, the bullet shatters his mask, right? In the middle of this kind of some sort of treaty signing. But that was a pretty big revelation when Zavala figured out who saw Crow's face for the first time. And instead of doing a double take, Zavala helped him up. And Cade was Zavala's best friend in this entire, if you look at the series as a whole, Cade and Zavala are they're best friends in the lore, in the games, and the storylines. They're best friends. And this person killed your best friend. He didn't bat an eye because he knows a Guardian is a Guardian, and he knows that Crow doesn't know his past life as Aldrin, which was a big revelation because you would think you see the face of your best friend's killer or whatever, you're gonna go crazy, right? And so that was a pretty big revelation. Moving into the Witch Queen, the Hive have kind of been the main enemy, I would say, for the most part since Forsaken. Savathun being Oryx's sister, one of the three Hive gods. Oryx, Savathun, and Xivu Arath are the three Hive gods. The Hive, Savathun has a ghost, and Savathun has the light. And there are light-bearing Hive, right? And that was a big surprise to everybody. And that's kind of the central theme of the Witch Queen is how did the Hive get the light? Did they steal it? How did they get it? The biggest revelation was that out of all of the races that have been blessed with the light, the Hive were the first to be blessed with the light. And everybody was shocked because Savathun was dying and begged the Traveler, or not begged, but was scolding the Traveler in that one cutscene.
And see, this is when the drama start coming into the Destiny thing. You'd be like, wait, what? And that's why I say story matters. Story matters and narrative matters.
Yeah.
The drama with the DLC and these seasons and stuff, you'd be like, wait, hold on. What? It pulls you in. And I think because of Destiny 2 being just the writing, the cutscenes and everything in the lore, it really makes the game even more interesting from the day it was released, from the first campaign. You just be like, wait, whoa, it gets deep.
Yeah, and the reason why these things matter 4, 5, 6, 7 years in is because you're growing with these characters and you realizing we've heard whispers about Savathun since the Taken King, the Books of Sorrow that Oryx, wrote for the his allegiance to the Witness, essentially, is what we kind of figure it is now. And Savathun kind of being cast out by Oryx because she is a trickster. She's the Hive god of essentially what mischief and I don't know, trickery is the wrong word, but essentially that, right? And so the whole thing within the Witch Queen is two truths, one lie, is the thing that you keep hearing throughout the entire campaign.
Mm-hmm.
and like you don't understand which like the things you're doing and the things you're hearing, what those are, and you find out that Savathun was blessed with the light, and she is like her whole thing during that campaign is her trying to remember her past and who she was, and like she ends up tricking you into revealing that past to her, uh which is just that whole campaign. That is probably before the Final Shape, the Witch Queen is probably the best campaign that in Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it would go up until the Final Shape. It would go the Witch Queen, Forsaken, Taken King, um, and then you can kind of fill out the rest. I guess Rise of Iron was pretty good too, for me. But it's yeah, there's a lot of drama in Destiny. There's a lot of character building, and the sad thing too is like a lot of these revelations and a lot of these like interesting facts and stuff are storylines in the seasons that go away when the next expansion comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really sad. And Destiny on their YouTube channel has kind of put up their cutscene archive type thing where it's separated by season and by expansion,
Yeah.
and you can go back and watch them and it's fine, but like there's dialogue that you missed, or that you'll like, even if you watch those, you'll miss dialogue during the missions, or
Yeah.
if you're in the Helm, which is another social space, like you'll miss dialogue from that, or there's just so many different things that you're going to miss. And uh that there's a couple YouTube channels that do a great job of dissecting the lore and kind of putting
Mm-hmm.
together the story for you if you don't understand. My Name is Bife is a great YouTube channel. Bife does his
He is insanely good, so
yeah.
detailed, and
Hmm.
it's worth watching because I'm just like, this is movie production.
Hmm.
Like this is no, him and his team is not playing around. They go deep, and
Hmm.
you could spend about 2 to 3 days just watching his stuff, getting snacks, and be like, oh my goodness, that happened, and it's
Yeah.
so good. You turned me on to it, Corey, and
Hmm.
I was watching it. I'm like, this is almost like a documentary,
Hmm.
and it's
Yeah.
that well produced.
Yeah, the video that Ed's talking about in particular, he does like anywhere between like 10 and 30-minute videos about lore and Destiny, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
character or an event or something that's going on behind the scenes of the main story. Like he does all kinds of things, right? He probably has I don't know, he's been doing it for 8-ish years now, I think. Um he probably has like probably 4 or 5 thousand videos on Destiny lore alone. Um, but he put out right before the Final Shape came out. He put out a 10-hour video of the story, basically the important beats of Destiny that you need to know going into the Final Shape.
Mm-hmm.
And 10 hours sounds like a long video, and yes, it is, but it did not feel like a 10-hour video. It's broken up into sections that make sense. It's broken up into like what would you say, 90 to 120-minute sections. um
Yeah.
he has a whole section of stuff you need to know that before Destiny 1 even begins. Like it's a great
Yeah.
video, and obviously like you can go into those chapters, and if there's something that interests you, you can kind of look at his videos on that section, and like, oh well, here's the overall view of the Battle of the Six Fronts. Well, I
Yeah.
want to know more about the Battle of the Six Fronts, and you can go look for probably 7 or 8 videos on that battle alone
I
on
think
that
that's why.
channel.
Yeah, when you introduced to me about them, I was watching the Witch Queen stuff, and I
Hmm.
was just like, and it was so
The
detailed.
dynasty video he
Yeah.
put out. Yeah,
Yeah.
so before the Witch Queen came out, he put out a 3-hour fully animated video on the history of the Hive Gods and their relevance and the lore behind the Books of Sorrow, and how the three sisters kind of turned into the hive gods, and how Ulrix turned into Oryx, and Sathona turned into Savathun. How they all kind of became their hive god forms, and the Leviathan, and all these things, all these awesome things, right? And it's so fascinating. We're gonna get into the final shape now. I know I didn't really do a great job of discussing the story in like the last, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes, but look, there's 10 years of story to dissect, plus all of the lore. We're going to get into spoilers of the final shape now. If you want to know more about the story of Destiny and you have not played it, I would highly recommend going to My Name is Bife and watching that video, that documentary 10-hour video of the story so far. If you want to read stuff, the Ishtar Collective's website is very lore heavy and very informative. It has it has all of the lore cards for each of the characters, each of the weapons, each of the locations. Like, you want to learn more about the Clovis Bray Corporation and the EXO program, they have a whole section on that. Like, they have everything you could possibly want to read about. So the Destiny wiki is an okay place to go to, although it's clearly not finished. It kind of looks like somebody hasn't worked on it in a couple years, but
and one more thing, everybody. Check out some episodes of Tower Casual. There's some good breakdown episodes on Tower Casual.
Yeah, that's the Destiny podcast that I host. A lot of it is like kind of recent stuff, but if you go back, like, we kind of go through the games as it goes along. Each episode's probably an hour and a half ish. I don't know. It's I wouldn't go there for lore. It's more of like breaking down what's going on at that time in the game, both story wise and mechanically, I guess you would say.
Yeah, so let's still check it out.
Yeah.
Plug.
Yeah. But I guess now that we're an hour and 20 minutes in, man, the final shape is so good.
Yeah.
The final shape is so good, man. If you want to see how you can become a Patreon producer, head on over to patreon.com/BossRushNetwork. The Patreon producers for this month are Adriel Munger, Austin Campbell, Celeste Roberts, Christian S., Sana Dirrig, Francisco Santillan, Matthew Keel, and Todd Oxtra. Thanks for your continued support of the Boss Rush Network.
So everybody, just to let you know, this is the part there are going to be spoilers in it. If you are intrigued about it and you want to hear everything, you can continue to listen. If not, this is the point where you can stop listening. And we thank you for watching this video and listening to the podcast. If you don't want to hear about the final shape because you're planning to play it yourself. So we're just letting you know that this is the spoiler part of the podcast. So you ready, yeah. Corey? Let's talk about the final shape.
Yeah. So the final shape is relatively short. I think you could probably beat the campaign and its sub quests and side quests in probably 6-ish hours, I would say.
I've been getting myself handed.
I would say 6 to 8 hours. You could probably beat the campaign. It's, in my opinion, the final shape is the best campaign Bungie has ever delivered. I think, we can start with the Pale Heart, I guess, as a location where you kind of go inside the Traveler, right? And that's kind of how Lightfall's year ends with the Season of the Wish, right? Where Crow essentially wishes us to the to Riven, who's the last Ahamkara, which is also known as a wish dragon, the fabled 15th wish. If you want to look up the the lore of the 15th wish and like the wishes beforehand, you can go look that up. I'm not going to dive into it here, but basically, there are dragons in Destiny called Ahamkaras, and there's actually points in the game where you fight them, including the Last Wish raid. You fight Riven and kill Riven, and so the Season of the Wish leads into the Final Shape, and you are actually talking to the ghost of Riven, who apparently after death can still grant their wishes and can like use their powers to influence other, kind of pose as other characters. Because Crow wished he could essentially wished he could like apologize to Cade for everything that happened and that he's not that person anymore. And well, wouldn't you know it, Cade is inside the Traveler, and so the wish he asked for led he wished us to go inside the Traveler to kind of take on the Witness, but in doing so he also wished that he could apologize to Cade, which is why Cade is back.
Yes.
So Cade the big surprise, the big reveal at the Final Shape reveal, right, was that Cade is back. Cade is alive. He's inside the Traveler, and we don't really know why Cade is back until obviously later in the story, which I just told you just now, that we find out that Crow's wish had a lot to do with him coming back, because he wanted to apologize and make amends and everything. And so throughout the campaign, like, you're kind of seeing everybody's reaction with Cade, and he's back, and you kind of travel through the Pale Heart, and the Pale Heart inside the Traveler is the most beautiful location I think they've ever made.
Yes.
It's colorful, it's vibrant, it's diverse. It's the first solo instance campaign location that they've made, which means that there's no other players in the campaign unless you invite them in the area where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
As you progress, they start adding horror elements, and there's a lot of I guess the way the environment changes based on what's going on in the story is really provocative and crazy and scary. Like, when you land in the Pale Heart, things are weird. Like, you see the giant ghosts right in that, kind of embedded in that pillar, but everything's still beautiful and colorful, and you're kind of running through the area. And then you get to the old tower. Like, you get to this, there's a walkout moment. There's a Bethesda style walkout moment here, a Breath of the Wild walkout moment for people who have been playing since day one. You come out of this tunnel, and everything looks familiar but different, right? That's the whole point of the Pale Heart, is like the Traveler and the Witness are formulating this area based on characters' memories, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And since we're all in there, it's playing on everybody's memories, right? And they're combining everybody's memories, and this is how the Pale Heart was, created. We didn't really talk about getting into the Pale Heart either, though. That first area where you kind of land in the portal going in, and it's all purple, right? That purple area. Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. I love that.
It was all that platforming, jumping, like, and fighting, and everything. Yeah. And then it's just, I think you're falling into it. I don't know. I think you're in the air. It's like something that's pulling you, I think.
Yeah, you get to a warp area, and it, like, you get to the air because you're trying to get to the area where like it's starting to pull you in, right? And
Yeah.
when you land in the area where you're supposed to get sucked into, you can see your ship kind of crash, and you see bits and pieces of different Destiny locations. Like the Cosmodrome rocket is in there, the reef architecture is in there. You see Devram's church from the European Dead Zone in there. Like there's all kinds of recognizable area, like architecture in there from places that you've been throughout Destiny, right? And so you're kind of making your way through this platform. Like you land in, like, where you land, and you wouldn't know this because you didn't do the raid, but where you land is Oryx's throne room from the raid from Kingsfall.
Oh.
And where you start the final encounter against Oryx. Like there's the blue pillars on each side, and as you walk, like the way it's designed in the raid, you walk down this hallway and Oryx just starts climbing up the front of the ship because he's so huge, right? Well, when you land in Oryx's throne room, and then you have to do these platforming things, and you end up in the European Dead Zone at one point, you end up in the reef at one point, you end up on the moon at one point. You start ending up in all these, like all this architecture and locations start merging together into one space. And that's kind of what the Pale Heart is like, oh, this is clearly like Earth, and I'm running here. Oh, I go through this little alleyway. Well, now this is the underbelly of Europa. Why am I in the underbelly of Europa? And then you keep going a little bit, and you're like, oh, well, this is the the Vex area of Venus from Destiny 1. Why am I here? Like there's all these locations that you recognize sort of, but they're all kind of pieced together. Like it almost reminds me of the way, I don't know if anybody played Returnal, but like the way those levels are kind of pieced together. They're designed to be pieced together, but not really.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a kind of a semi-procedurally generated level that you're going through. Not that this area is procedurally generated, but it kind of reminds me of that. It was like, oh, well, all these places we've been, they're just kind of being seamlessly interconnected, whether you're going through a portal, whether you're going through a tunnel or a hidden passageway, and obviously the Pale Heart has its own areas too, but like, it's just so wonderful to see all this stuff. And you make your way through that first area and you get sucked into the Pale Heart, right? At the end, you get sucked through. And it really reminds me of the Red War campaign when you get sucked through, you get sucked up to the top of the station, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of what it really reminds me of. It also reminds me a little bit of the Prophecy Dungeon too, when you get sucked into the boss fight area. But you kind of make your way through that first area, and there's that walkout moment where you realize that you're about to walk into the original tower that was destroyed at the beginning of Destiny 2. But at the top of the stairs is Cade playing the harmonica, and he's playing the Destiny tower theme from Destiny 1 on the harmonica, right? And then you have that interaction, and you realize like Cade doesn't really realize why he's alive, because he said he kind of made peace with his death. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, what did you think about that opening area?
At first I just thought it was so beautiful. I mean, I had a hard time because of one of the fights, like the final fight before you went in.
Mm-hmm. You're not supposed to fight any of that stuff. You're just supposed to run by them.
You want to know what? I fought them all because, like, I thought I know I had to get. I think I had to get something to open up that door because it was shielded. You had to do something to break through so you could get through it. And I fought them all. I literally fought them all. Even like, because there was one of them that
are you talking about the purple area, or are you talking about the first area in
the first area when you actually get in?
Yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah.
So I fought all of that. And then when I was able to get in, and just like I guess it was like a point that I started hearing the narrative and stuff. I just
Mhm.
stopped there and like looked around, and this is when I talked about the trailer,
Mhm.
because the grass in the game looked so beautiful in that trailer. And so when I started to be in that area, I'm like, good night, this is gorgeous. It was
Mhm.
gorgeous and relaxing for some unknown reason. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, Bungie stepped up with their art design. Like this is a whole. It felt like a whole different game
Yeah.
at that point.
Mhm. It's
And then
incredible.
yeah, and then when I got to K6, and I'm like, wait a minute, because they showed the trailer like when I was playing it and stuff before it kept get disconnected and stuff. They showed the trailer on when he got killed and everything,
Mhm.
and then you see him, and it's just like this mug is kicking back,
Mhm. Yeah.
playing harmonica. I'm like, oh wow, this is very interesting.
And
I
that's something like if you're not paying attention to Destiny, and like I really wish that would have been. I really wish they could have kept the Cade thing a surprise
mhm,
until at least the end of Season of the Wish, because they showed the cutscene of Crow and Cade kind of having a gunfight, but they didn't know who each other were, right? And then
yeah,
they show the iconic opposite scene of like in Forsaken, you see Crow staring down the barrel of Ace of Spades at Cade and murdering him in cold blood while Cade's laying on the floor, right? Well, Crow falls over and they show the iconic scene, but it's flipped. So Cade is staring down the barrel of Ace of Spades, which is his weapon, but it's been rebuilt by the light. So it's kind of got this glowing kind of
uh,
blue aura around it.
yeah,
And like he's about to kill Crow. And then Glint, who is Crow's ghost, flies out. And Cade can't, or Crow can't believe that Cade is alive, and he's like in this terrified manner. He's like, you died, like he, because that's all anybody could ever remind him of through the
yeah,
4 years leading up to that. And Cade pulls his gun back. He said, "So did you," indicating that Crow is a guardian now, right, and not Aldrin, which is the last time Cade remembered him. Uh, and so he helps him up, right, and
yeah,
that's kind of how. And they stare off at the monolith in the Pale Heart, which is where where you assume the witness is, right. And it's just a really cool cutscene because they end up throughout the campaign becoming friends. Like they have this bond that's like really
yeah,
strong, which is crazy because there's a lore point in that they don't share in the game. You have to like look it up, where um that first night they are at camp together. The first night they're at camp together,
yes,
Cade stays up all night debating on if he should kill Crow in his sleep. And he like thinks about pulling his gun on Glint and killing Glint and then killing Crow, but he pulls back and does not. He decides he's not going to, because of some of the things that we come to realize towards the end of the campaign, and actually at the very end of the campaign, which
well,
was tear
before we
jerking.
before we even get there, there is a part like when there's that snow level that uh that
Mm-hmm.
Crow and Kay is sitting on the mountain
Mm-hmm.
talking.
Yeah.
And like I went there and I listened to the whole thing and I'm like, oh, that's like a moment and
Yeah.
stuff. And you're talking about Bondi. No, the really part about this that really stood out, and I know this is a little bit further in the Final Shape, was when I think Kate was they were trying to find out on how to defeat the witness, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Kay's ghost got destroyed. It was those all those different flashbacks. I
Oh,
think it
it
was
was
the witness,
no, it wasn't.
or was it?
Those flashbacks are dreams that are conjured by the witness to show them their most wanted desires,
Mm-hmm.
and if they don't give in to temptation, it makes them relive their uh you know so Cade, for example, like
Cause was
the
he? Cause it
the
was he
witness.
jumping around? in those flashbacks? It wasn't
Yeah,
it Cade?
they were jumping around to
Okay.
different parts, right? But the thing that Cade wanted most was to have Sundance back, which is his ghost, who died
Hmm.
in died in Forsaken, obviously also, and you know, Sundance was Cade's best friend, and they had a really strong relationship for a long time, obviously, because Cade's been around forever. Um, and the witness offered Cade a real life, and to have Sundance come back and favor, in turn of, finalizing everything, the, and Cade kind of realizes that he shouldn't. And so there's like all these terrifying cutscenes, but that's like one of the best cinematics they've ever done.
Yes,
Ever.
dude, it was powerful because you
Mm-hmm.
felt for Cade, like
Mm-hmm.
and because when what you said Sundance, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
name. When Sundance gets killed, I think that's the final memory because it's that purple. It's purple. I think it's a purple shot, and he sees him like
Yeah, because
explode.
he's reliving the death of Sundance in Forsaken, and the Prison of Elders has like this purple aura around it, and the scorn kind of, the basement of the prison
Uh huh.
like has this purple glow to it. If you go back and watch those cutscenes, there's like this very gray purple aura, and the Prison of Elders is in the reef, which has like this purple glow because it's run by the
Yeah.
Awoken, and
Okay.
it's the color purple is very, yeah.
That shot
Mm-hmm.
was so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Just like and I know this is gonna sound weird, everybody, but there's a color balance to it that
Mm-hmm.
makes that shot stand out in the final
Mm-hmm.
shape. I'm like, this is surpass artistic. It's cinematic. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is picture perfect museum artwork look. Like
Mm-hmm.
it, like it was just it was done so right. Like it needed that slow motion of Sundance being destroyed. It
Mm-hmm.
needed that. Like
Yeah.
it was just so powerful. I put the controller down because I was watching it, and I came away as super impressed. And we always talked about Bungie having amazing cutscenes, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's the trailer or it's in the game. Like they are high level, top tier up there. Like
Yep.
and the final shape, just in this cutscene, I was just like, "This is insane." And I felt like I wanted to rewatch it again.
Mm-hmm.
It was so good.
Yeah. I think a lot of the cutscenes that were done in this game, like the I guess the CG cutscenes, were all like,
Mm,
you could see where the money went. Right, this was super,
yeah,
and obviously they have a mix of CG versus in-engine cutscenes versus like, the one scene I complain about often in this campaign. It's like the only stickler for me is when Ikora and Cade's kind of reunion happens in like this patrol space, and you're watching it with your gun out, like them, and that's like everybody else. Like Zavala gets his own cutscene, right, with Cade at the campfire. Crow and Cade have the initial cutscene at the beginning, and they have another one
yeah.
later. Especially once you do their side quest together, right? That cool like side hunt kind of side quest where you're hunting that ogre with them.
The wild card, I think
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah, the wild
Yeah,
card side mission,
I just finished that one.
and
Uh,
you know it's uh it's very special, these cutscenes, and then
mhm.
Ikora again gets the short end of the stick, and I mean
And it was
that's been the complaint about Ikora throughout the entire series, though, is that she has no story. There is no story. Like,
mm,
she's like, obviously she's part of the team, right? But like Cade and Zavala have been way larger parts of the story than she ever has been. I mean, she was kind of front and center in the Witch Queen for a while because of, the hidden were tracking Savathun, her team of, you know scout guardians that nobody really knows who they are. But like partway through that campaign, Eris kind of takes over front and center, and Ikora kind of disappears, and she just has no story. And the fact that like her and Cade, like you read the lore, and like they have a very kindred, like almost familial relationship, like brother sister bond type
Mm-hmm.
thing going on. And for their reunion, like Ikora was very clearly the one that was the most upset about Cade's death in Forsaken, and for their reunion and how powerful that could have been in a cutscene to have it be done in a patrol space.
That hug would have meant so much more.
Yeah, it would have been. It should have been done in a cutscene, and
Mm-hmm.
that's my only real gripe about the story and the campaign is that like, man, I get that some of this stuff is done in engine and in game specifically for certain reasons, but that should have been done in a cutscene.
It's a very important emotional moment,
Yeah,
and executing it in that way just makes it feel, because I think she like really, when you kind of play Destiny 2, even like when it first came out, like you kind of feel like she's the team leader of all the Guardians. Like she's the head honcho, she's the boss of everything. Um,
yeah.
that's
I
the
mean,
idea that I get.
technically Zavala is, but like I would say I mean, Ikora is very clearly second in command, right? And
Mhm.
she's obviously the more aggressive, like we got to take action type character, and
Yeah.
Zavala is the more level-headed kind of we got to plan this stuff out uh commander character, right? And um those kind of those personalities, kind of moving on into the story, like kind of flip on their heads a little bit, where Ikora becomes the more level-headed one throughout the campaign because Zavala, again, a seasonal storyline. You learn about Zavala's family, about how he left the Iron Lords to go have a family with his wife and his adopted son. And, you learn about that in Season of the Haunted, and you kind of like really learn about it there. And you go back to, if you didn't play that season, like you kind of like don't understand what's going on in this cutscene or in this kind of story beat, right? Where they don't really set it up well. They just assume that you played Season of the Haunted and know that Zavala had a wife and a child, and that they were, his son was killed in a battle in a raid, like somebody raided their camp, and
Mm.
Zavala ended up leaving. Like him and his wife ended up leaving each other because they thought it would be for the best, and so Zavala goes back to the Iron Lords, and obviously ends up becoming the Vanguard commander. But um, this whole scene with him like flips him on his head, right? Because the witness tempts him with his family and tells him that he could
Yeah.
have his family back.
And that was the horror part of it and
Hmm.
everything,
Yeah,
which
this
was
is where
weird.
this is like, sorry, not to interrupt you, but this,
No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
until except for like the wild card side quests, which you should do before you finish the main campaign. I actually think it makes you finish it before you even unlock the Excision mission, which is the final mission of the game.
Yeah, I'm doing all the side stuff before
Yeah,
I get, and I already know the ending. Everybody, I've seen pictures of it. But we're still gonna
yeah,
discuss it. I'm doing like the side one. Like I said, I
hmm
just finished the wild card one, and I think
yeah.
I got three more to do. I think you said, I think there's five of them. Uh,
I mean, there's a lot more than five, but I some of them take place after Excision. Like the storyline takes place
mm,
after Excision, but you can still do them before the Excision mission, which is strange. Like all the Micah 10 hidden Lost Ghost quests
yeah,
and the paranormal activities quests uh, kind of flip flop between before and after, which you can do those whenever. But
okay,
those quests are cool. There's a lot of story. Uh, that's when you that's when you find out that Cade kind of thinks that Micah could have been Ace at one point, which is Cade's son that he kind of remembers but doesn't remember.
Yeah.
Um, uh, hold on a second. You this is also where you find out that Cade was a bodyguard for Maya. I forget what her name is. Basically, like a really strange Maya Sundaresh, who's like one of these crazy like anti-heroes in the lore. He was a bodyguard for her, and you find out that I mean, you learn way more about Micah's involvement in the Six Coyotes, like this fire team of six hunters, which you
Mm-hmm.
don't get very much lore on in the game at all, except for like a hunter cloak in one of the Destiny 1 campaigns. And then you have to read about her in the lore to know who she even is. Um, it's really fascinating. But you start learning more about Micah 10. You start learning more about Cade's involvement with Maya Sundaresh. You start learning about Cade's history before everything. Um, I mean, obviously, we already knew about the hunters bet, where that's kind of a known quantity, but and Ace of Spades is his hand cannon, his weapon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's named after his son that he doesn't remember. And the reason why he named his weapon Ace of Spades before he became Cade 6, um, because every time an exo gets reset, they lose more and more of their memory. That's
Yeah.
the number at the end of their name is how many times they've been reset. Um, and so before Cade was Cade 6, his weapon is Ace. Like his son's name was Ace, or at least he thinks he had a son named Ace, and so he named his weapon Ace uh, to remember his son. But there's this whole storyline where it kind of explores Cade thinking that Micah 10 could have been Ace at one point, because even though, like I said at the beginning, Micah is a trans woman who was a male as a human, and once Micah's consciousness was transferred into an exo body, became a woman in that exo body.
Mm-hmm.
And also Micah's story is cool because she's a den mother for all of the lost ghosts who don't have guardians yet, or have lost their guardians, or you know which is what those lost ghosts quests are for. um
Ooh.
so anyways, that's really getting into the weeds of this. But Zavala's going back to Zavala's storyline and his family, and the witness tempting Zavala with uh his family.
That house was weird.
Yeah,
Like
that
I
whole scene
like
was scary, man.
it was, but it it harkens back to like it had a Friday the 13th kind of vibe to it, because it felt like an old school cabin in the early 90s like or 80s like horror movie. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, wait a minute, I'm in a galactic space. What is this cabin doing? I was like, this is bunkers. But the way it played out, and like, and because the witness is voicing everything,
Mm-hmm.
or parts of it, and I'm like, oh my goodness! And the way it just zooms in, because I think it's the wife that's standing on the table or something.
Yeah, it's
The
the statue. The
way
wife. It's a statue of the wife of his wife, Soraya, or not Soraya. What's her name? It's a statue of his wife. Starts with an S. Um, but yeah, it didn't like
it,
it just keeps getting closer and closer, and then it gets all
and
of a
then
sudden
it like
taller.
all that flash and stuff, and it's
Yeah.
weird because while you go when you're the guardian and you're playing through some of the levels, you'll slip into like the witness, and you'll see these faces on some of the blocks, and you start get to an area and you'll hear the voices and you see the statues, and it's just like this is really like. I love how they mix that this beauty and this nature and like everybody feeling emotional, but then it's this horror from the
Hmm.
witness. And
Yeah.
just like he's talking to you to be like, this is what you really need to do. You need to give in. And it's just like the contrast is so good
Yeah.
and everything. What happens is that when you enter those witness times, your movement is even slow. You don't shoot nothing. You just literally you get
Hmm.
dialogue, you get story, and you move on. And it's just like, oh my goodness, why is this happening? Like it
Yeah.
like he takes the control away from you just
Hmm.
as a player. You have no choice but to walk, hear this, and then you can progress. And once you get out, then you can start going back to your whatever the game is. And that's frightening, but executed so well in this.
Yeah, and then like throughout the world, you see like the scenes of the temptations for Crow and Zavala, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think after that scene in particular, you go through this one section after you like the slowdown section, and you end up inside the cabin of Zavala pointing his gun at his ghost at Tarj, demanding that Tarj uses the light to bring them back. And Tarj kind of like, you can kill me if you want, but you know I can't do that, type of thing, you know? And like, this kind of plays into what happens later. But, after that, you start getting into like the weird, like, you're getting into these geometric tunnels, and then you round a corner and there's just all of these like faces, right? And planted in some of the walls, and it's like kind of
Yeah.
jump scary every time I go through there because I forget that tunnel exists. And then
And the expectation is something's going to move. It's very
claustrophobic.
anime-ish.
It's very
Yes.
claustrophobic too because you have to crouch through it most of the time,
Yeah.
and then it becomes like very vertical but very skinnily. What do you call it? Like very, I don't know. It's very
Scantly.
it's very
Oh.
vertical, but like there's not a lot of room to move, and like you have to make it to these, and then like you start getting to the places where like not only are these geometric shapes forming tunnels and the faces are forming tunnels, but you start seeing like arms and hands kind of forming
Hands.
different things, and
Yeah.
like you think they're tree branches but they're really hands creating archways. And as you progress towards the monolith, right, because the Pale Heart, something we didn't mention in the Pale Heart, but like aside from it being like probably one of the most sophisticated locations they've ever made, with like the tunnels and the secrets and the portals leading you to other places and stuff like that. They It's also a linear location, which is very different from Destiny
Mm-hmm.
because all the locations up to this point have literally been a giant circle, right? And
Yeah.
so um you can literally walk from one end of the map to the other and get to the monolith from the old tower. um and so as you make your way towards the monolith, things get crazier and crazier and more surreal and more, you know, uh, abstract. And you get to these points where like you're literally jumping on hands and fingers to platform, and you're making your way
Mm-hmm.
through these weirdly bright geometric tunnels, and then you make your way into like pyramid ships that lead out into like these sandstorms, and like it just gets all crazy, which is like you can literally see the change in the world as you make your way to the monolith. And then
Yeah. One of them just felt like you were in an Egypt. Like
mhm,
it's those. It looked like the wooden color things, and then just the area looks. I'm like, wait a minute, how the heck did I end up in? Like, I think you're in like a cave or something. You had just did a fight.
mhm.
It was like a weekly strike. It
Yeah,
was a
it was
kind of
a
thing.
it was yeah, one of the missions is a strike where you fight a tormentor at the end. And there's
Yeah,
like the mechanics where you have to dunk the orbs in the Ahamkara skulls
yeah.
to bring his shield down, right? So that's yeah, because when you come out of there, you go into the sandstorm, and then you go into these like temples, right, to kind of
Hmm.
make your way through um, because after the whole Zavala cabin situation, Zavala kind of like you progress a little bit more through the story, but then Zavala kind of goes off on his own, right, and leaves Tarj behind, which is his ghost. Tarj is Zavala's ghost, and
Yeah.
You are actually going with Cade and Crow and Tarj to go find Zavala, and you think Zavala's being tempted by the witness, and he's going to go succumb to the darkness, right? That's kind of what you think, because obviously, even though his family's been gone for 1,000 years or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
he still misses them. I can't remember if it's this story, this campaign, or the season of the Haunted, but there's that kind of like graphic cutscene where it's, Zavala visits his family, but then there's like a whole field of descendants that Zavala visits because of Safia, which is his wife's name, not the other name I said. Safia is his wife's name, and like the descendants from her second marriage, right? Um, the field keeps building and building out and building out, and it becomes this graveyard instead of just the one grave, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Even though that she's been dead for however many years, decades, centuries, he still misses them, right? And that's very, the love you have for your family is unlike anything you have for anyone else. And so you think he's going to go bring his family back because he loves his family.
Right.
And you realize that, once he goes, once you catch up to him and he goes into that wall of darkness, which is another awesome cutscene, by the way. Not quite as cool as Cade's cutscene, but really cool with like, the hands reaching out and him kind of standing out in the middle of this area, and you see the pyramid ship in the distance, and
Yeah.
it's just this cool imagery. But you realize he's not being tempted by the witness. He's going to see if he can kill the witness himself, so nobody else has to be tempted by the witness anymore. And he doesn't want anybody to interfere with it because he's Zavala and he thinks his plan is going to work every time. But then, as he's kind of in there, Tarj sacrifices himself to save everybody and to save Zavala, right? And then Zavala kind of realizes what he did and feels really terrible about it. And so you kind of go through this part of the game where Zavala is kind of, how do we want to say it? Not sad, but like
Devastated.
yeah, kind of devastated, mixed with he comes to the realization that this has to be like an effort by the team. And then he goes in to Ikora to learn, like he asks her to at one point to learn how to use the darkness because he can't use the light anymore, which comes into play in the final cutscene, which is super cool. Or the final battle, I should say. And so there's just all this stuff leading into the final mission, and getting to the final boss fight in the final mission, before the excision mission is like so crazy.
Before we get to that part, when you was going to the statues to find information and stuff, Tarj was still alive, right?
Yeah, because Tarj was basically interrogating the statues. So also through this campaign, we should probably explain who the witness is, right? We should probably explain who the witness is. The witness is the being who the being who has somehow absorbed their entire race into this one entity. And that race was the first race to kind of harness the Traveler and the Tree of Silver Wings And then there's the whole story about the gardener and the winnower, which we'll get to in a little bit later. But essentially, the traveler was the traveler was embedded into their civilization and left them right long ago. And the witness's first attempt at the final shape failed, but it did cause the first collapse of humanity, which is a whole lore thing where basically the humans were figuring out like how to use the light and what the traveler was, and like what the golden age, and then the collapse, and then the rebuild, and then building the last city and all that kind of stuff. Pre Destiny 1, by the way. Stuff they don't really tell you in the game unless you played through some of the seasons, and even then it's like maybe. So the witness, this is their second attempt at the final shape, and the final shape is essentially merging the light and the darkness to create essentially perfection. And in doing so, a lot of things are going to be destroyed. I mean, there's literally a cutscene in the game where you see the Earth becoming these odd square slash what do you want to call it? These columns of Earth. Like the Earth is just becoming this weird Jenga puzzle, essentially.
Yeah.
Which you can actually see in one of the trailers, and it's scary, And there's a cutscene with Ikora in it where she's fighting a Vex, which is part of one of these temptations too. And so the witness is just this entity who can harness the darkness but needs the light, which means the witness needs to infect the traveler to harness the light to perform the final shape. And the raid Salvation's Edge is a literal interpretation of the final shape and preventing the final shape. There's literally a puzzle within the raid where you are manipulating shapes, right? Which is just this really crazy literal representation of this figurative thing that's about to happen and that you're trying to prevent. And so the witness has these disciples. You learn about many of them throughout the course of Destiny. The witness tries to have some sort of representative from every race or culture, right? Like Rulk is one, often referred to as the first disciple, probably the most powerful disciple, which you learn about in Lightfall. Rulk is the raid boss in Valve the Disciple, which is Lightfall's raid. Nezarec is one, which is the disciple of nightmares. Very scary backstory with a very mediocre raid. I'm not gonna lie. Root of Nightmares is probably the second or third easiest raid I've ever done.
Oh wow!
I ran through it. I've done it twice, and both times. I mean, I was with a group that knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So I mean that helped, but we ran through that raid both times in under 45 minutes. So,
wow.
Which should tell you everything you need to know. It's cool though. The weapons are cool. The shotgun from that raid is really good. But the raid is just not very difficult at all. Callus, Emperor Callus, the Cabal Emperor was one. They tried to recruit Queen Mara as one. They tried to recruit Savathun as one. They're trying to recruit the Vanguard as one, which is what these temptations are. To become a disciple and help perform the final shape. They try to recruit us throughout this campaign too, as one. So it's like a big, scary entity, right? Megamind looking smokestack head type scary thing.
Yeah.
By the way, they're in the new art book that's coming out in November. They have concept art of the Witness of previous iterations, and there are some scary versions of the Witness that they didn't end up using, which I kind of wish they would have because they look way cooler and way scarier.
Ooh.
But yeah, the Witness is a very scary entity. So much so that I guess we can kind of head more towards the end of the campaign here.
Yes.
Um, the the final fight in the campaign before you get to the excision mission. So the story of uh, the story of the Final Shape takes place in three sections. It's the campaign, the 7 mission campaign, plus the extra stuff, right? The side quests and the extra quests inside.
Yeah.
Then you have the raid, Salvation's Edge, which, you know, I think they made the right choice of, yeah, it adds to the campaign if you play through it, but it's also one of the hardest raids, and we don't expect everybody to ever play this because only 10% or like something like, I don't know, 10% of the player base ever even finishes a raid, um, which is a whole discussion in of itself. And then the Excision mission, which is a mission that unlocked after the raid was beaten by World's First. And what's cool is that the World's First race uh, is the weekend the raid comes out. World's First is essentially, um, you know, a race to see who can finish the raid first.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get like a belt and all kinds of special things and acknowledgement by Bungie and all this stuff. Like it's a huge deal being world's first. And that raid team is the canonical fire team now in Destiny for
Oh.
kind of progressing the story. They are
Yeah.
now the canonical fire team, uh, which is crazy. And even in the final cutscene in Excision before the mission starts, Zavala even acknowledges the 6-man fire team invaded the monolith and has pushed the Witness back into the whatever.
Yeah.
And so before we get into the raid and Excision, right? Um, the final mission, you are kind of like making your way up to, man, I don't even know how you want to explain this, Ed. Like, it's just this crazy kind of vertical mission. There's raid mechanics throughout this entire campaign too, which
Yeah.
was really nice to see for a change because usually they're saved for like dungeons and Grandmaster Nightfall type stuff. And um, but it was nice to see some raid mechanics in here, right? And so once you get that final room where you kind of fight the subjugator in the middle, and like you see the Witness, and the Witness is like just kind of floating around and throwing things
Yeah.
at you, and man, the Witness is kind of scary. It's just a really crazy fight, and the fact that like you do all of that and you don't even kill the Witness in the final mission of the campaign. You barely scratch the surface. Like, it's basically like you do all that, and like basically you like scratch the Witness's face and he gets really angry is basically what it is, this whole fight.
Yeah.
Right? You barely you don't do anything, but man, escaping that final mission and the cutscene afterwards with Cade and Crow and Ikora kind of carrying Zavala out of there, and Cade kind of running through and almost getting grabbed by the Witness's giant massive hands, and Crow using a super to save Cade, and it's just all this cool things come together. That whole final cut scene, man, is so cool of the
it's
campaign.
so action packed and it keeps you
Yeah.
on your
Well,
toes.
like,
Like it's so
well,
good.
like you can, the witness comes down and is towering over
Yes.
over the Vanguard and Crow, right? Like they're all standing there, and the witness is like towering over, and you see Mara come in in the helm to take you out after you
Uh,
escape, and like you see the witness just like throw their hand up and like grab the helm with like essentially the force, and like the helm, you can see the helm kind of start finalizing, which like in this case finalizing pretty much means like breaking down and turning everything into just nothing,
yes.
and you can see it happening, and then the escape, like everybody just has to escape, and it's that whole scene is so action packed and crazy and nuts, and that
It
leads, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was supposed to say the camera angles. Like, and the reason why I'm bringing up the camera angles is because when it's literally I don't I want to say Indiana Jones's kind of feel to it, but
Kinda.
they're just it's just yeah, it's just something like the camera angles with the diags and them just running and you just seeing the hands go everywhere. It's so good. I'm like, y'all have to be watching like 80s or 90s action movies or like jungle
Mhm.
adventure movies to get stuff like this because you want to see this in a sci-fi movie, but
Yeah.
it's done so well. And then I like it when the hand looks like it's almost about to get them, and she's just like, "Come on, guys!" and they all disappear and they
Mhm.
get away, and it's just like, oh, it's amazing on how they did it. I was just like, Bungie, y'all clown with these cutscenes in this expansion.
Yeah. It was a great campaign. Like that ending made it great, right? But like
Mm,
we knew going in that the raid was going to be the end of the campaign, right? What we didn't know is that they were going to unlock a special mission for everyone after the raid was completed. Right. And so
yeah.
the raid basically is you preventing the final shape from happening and pushing the witness out of the monolith, which, spoilers, you see the monolith, you think the witness is at the top. The monolith is the witness. The monolith, like the monolith is the body of the witness. And the platforming you're doing is the witness's body and the witness's hands and, parts of the world that the witness has already finalized. Like,
Mm,
it's really cool. And like you see like the witness's hands coming out through portals to try to smash you or kick you off the ledge or kill you or all these kind of things. And then like also within the raid is the first time you ever not only, you know, hear this voice for the first time, but like you hear from the winnower for the first time, which is the confirmation that the gardener and the winnower not only exist but are still alive and are still running the show, which is also confirmation that the witness is not the big bad you thought they were.
he
There's
was. Oh,
an
it
even
was.
bigger bad pulling the strings of all of this, which gives you comfort. And granted, we already knew the episodes are coming and that Destiny is going to continue because it's a MMO and they need to keep
Mm,
going, because even though maybe it doesn't make as much money as it used to, it still makes a lot of money the way that World of Warcraft still brings in a lot of money. Um, and so not to get into the full story of the raid, but basically you prevent the final shape from happening and you find the weakness of the witness and you push the witness out of the monolith and out into the world of the Pale Heart, right? And so Excision unlocks. Excision is Destiny's first 12-person match made event that allows you to not only play with 11 other players, but also the NPCs of the game. And so it opens up with a cutscene, with a very well done CG cutscene, basically Destiny's version of the Avengers moment. It's Destiny's endgame moment, right? Every character that you've come to know throughout the entire series, right? I think there are only two characters missing from this scene, and I think it's because they're not Guardians. Devram isn't
Mm.
there, and then Asher Mir's not there because he's been sucked into the Vex network, but that's a different thing for a different whatever. But you see the Bray sisters are there. You see Osiris and Saint together. You see Savathun and the Lucent Hive are there. Empress Keitel and the Cabal are there. Lord Saladin is there in his Cabal military uniform because he was deemed a Valis by Emperor Keitel, which he's the first human Valis ever. Valis Forge. And it's so cool. It is so cool to see all the characters together, right? You see you see like the Vanguard standing together, and they bring Crow up at the front to be like to lead the charge with them.
Yeah.
You see Nimbus, the character that you meet during Lightfall, who's the character on basically the Silver Surfer. They're there. It's just like this cutscene made me cry because it just is like all the chaos and amazing times I've had with this game mixed with the bullshit and the downtimes of this game is like, even if I don't get to play anything after this cutscene, I will. This has been worth every minute of the 4,000 plus hours I've put into this game over the last 10 years.
It is Bungie had to reward the community with this, like with this ending, like with this level, because it's just like it 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 would let people down if they did it.
Well,
it wouldn't be the final wrap up or
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I think what they did was really smart. Where, yes, the raid is a major part of the story, but not the conclusive part of the story. And the fact that they made World's First the canonical fire team to push the Witness out and allowed all of the Guardians to take down the Witness once and for all type thing, right? Like,
yes,
that was the smartest way I think they could have done it, because they know not everybody raids. They know people are super invested in the lore but not able to find fire teams all the time. And they know people are invested in the game like me, for example. I've been invested for so long, but like my time is very limited. I only play at certain times of the day. I only play at certain times of the week. I have other games to play, right? Because of boss rush stuff. My investment in Destiny has deteriorated over the past year and a half or 2 years because of life and other things, right? And so the fact that they gave us this 12-person mission, which was cool, you got to play alongside the other characters. You see Zavala lead the charge with Stasis, right? Like, you just see him like power up Stasis, and his whole hand and arm turns to ice, and you see him like crash down onto the Witnesses' forces, which is super cool. And you see Cade and Crow fight side by side. It's just this. It was one of the coolest opening cutscenes to a final mission I've ever seen. You go through the final mission, which has pretty deep raid mechanics. I think a lot of those mechanics are actually in the raid itself. Obviously, the raid is much harder, and there's only 6 of you and not 12 of you. But like, you see Saint 14 using, the bubble. You see Nimbus flying around on their surfboard, dropping in, supply drops. You see Ikora shooting a Nova bomb. You see, all of these characters doing cool things. You see Mithrax in there, which is one of my favorite characters. The in there shooting stuff. You see Keitel and her Cabal warriors in there killing stuff. Like it's an Avengers Endgame level moment, and I don't understand. First of all, I don't understand how they pulled this off. Second of all, I don't know how this runs on base PS4 and Xbox One. Because of how much is just this sheer amount of stuff that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then like they allow you to kill.
I'm assuming Xbox One X and PS4 Pro might be
sure.
Might be handled, but like Xbox One Slim and like the regular PS4,
I have no
or
idea.
even Xbox One Fat, like you'd be like, whoa.
That's the one. That's the one you got to look at and be like, how is this even running? It's got to be running at like 540p and 20 frames a second at this point. Look, I bought an Xbox Series X to play Destiny at 60 frames a second and 1440p. I'm all good. I don't need it, you know. But like the fact that they let you kind of take out the witness and kind of wrap it up that way, you know, and the personal story, which we didn't touch on at all during the spoiler cast, that personal story you have with your Ghost throughout this entire campaign too, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, Ghost is such an important part of this entire decade of content, and it totally sets up Ghost to sacrifice themselves for you throughout the entire campaign. They are setting it up so closely, right, that Ghost is going to sacrifice themselves for you.
Is this a different voice actor in this one?
It's Nolan North.
It sounds so different.
They've added voice isolation and voice alterations over the years to make Ghost sound, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like a different voice actor.
Especially in this one, because throughout the campaign you can see Ghost is starting to like crack and kind of become broken right throughout the campaign.
Yeah. I think there's one of them. I think there's a shot that he has like a slice about the eye, to the eye or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it also depends. You can see more damage depending on which Ghost shell you're using too. But yeah, I mean, they totally set it up, and as like you progress through the Pale Heart, like Ghost's voice changes throughout the campaign. It starts getting deeper and slower, and you know, more robotic and kind of less cheerful, you know, because the ghost is made of light, and as the light depletes, like Ghost is going to deplete, you know. That's just how it's working. So you kill, full spoilers, I guess, you kill the witness, but you kill the witness by harnessing the light through your Ghost, and Ghost kills the witness, right, with the light, with the rest of their light. And so the final cutscene of the Light and Darkness Saga, you can call it, is your guard. And I did something really nerdy for this. I put on all the armor that I ended Destiny 1 in.
Mm-hmm.
I put it all on for this end cutscene, and had my entire cutscene run through with this armor set on, and it made me feel really nerdy, but also made the entire thing super special, because that was the armor set I wore from the Taken King mostly until, you know, I mean, I've had different transmog alterations and whatever, but like,
yeah,
this was the armor set that this is my canonical Guardian armor set, I guess you would call it. And so to have my Guardian kind of wear that set, and you know, Ghost is dead, and you're holding Ghost, and you like, as the player, you're like crying because you've been with Ghost for like so long, and you're wondering how Ghost is going to come back, because not just from a story perspective, but like the game mechanically works through Ghost, right? Like I said, you travel to the tower through pulling out the menus through Ghost, you pull up your quest through Ghost, like you do everything through Ghost. You summon your Sparrow through Ghost. And so like you're sitting there like, is Ghost really dead? Like, how does the game change without Ghost, Like, what's gonna happen? And so as you're begging the traveler in this kind of Twilight realm area, begging the traveler to save Ghost, and the traveler does nothing, right?
Yeah.
The camera spins around and you see Cade walk up behind you. And you have this very heart to heart discussion with Cade. And Cade said he realizes why he's back, why he's meant to be there. He realizes that he's never going to be able to leave the Pale Heart if he stays alive, right? Because he's made of the light, and the light can't leave the traveler.
Yeah.
And you have this really big heart to heart moment with Cade. And I think this also served as like a proper goodbye to the character, because we didn't really get that with Forsaken, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Forsaken, he was murdered. He was also not voiced by Nathan Fillion in Forsaken. He was voiced by Nolan North doing a Nathan Fillion impression, which 99% of the players wouldn't have ever guessed. But if you're in the weeds, you know that kind of stuff. And you can tell if you know. But if you don't know, you probably couldn't tell.
Yeah.
And so I felt like this was a great culmination of saying goodbye to Cade, bringing your Ghost back so the game works correctly, and just a final page turn of this Light and Darkness saga. And Cade, like, he says, now what do you say? He said, now tell Big Blue this was my decision, and tell everybody this was my decision. Nobody makes my fate but me, which is a line that you have been hearing for 10 years. Guardians make their own fate. Make your own fate. Nobody makes your fate but you.
Yeah.
And he holds Ghost and transfers his light into Ghost and brings Ghost back to life. And as he brings Ghost back to life, you see Cade kind of look over, and you see like I almost said a ghost of Sundance, but like an apparition of Sundance, like kind of saying it's okay, Cade. Like Sundance doesn't say anything, but you kind of get the feeling that Sundance is acknowledging that Cade is doing the right thing, and Cade wants to be with Sundance. And so like it's this really like full circle moment of Cade kind of saying his goodbyes, bringing Ghost back, and then Cade disappears, right? Cade disappears. And so it's just this really powerful moment.
That powerful sacrifice.
Yeah. And then, once Ghost comes back and you have your little discussion with Ghost and you head back to the tower. So one thing we didn't really acknowledge is like that wild card quest line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cade hands Crow a new cape.
Like cape. Yeah.
And it's the cape that symbolizes you're the new Hunter Vanguard, because the Hunters haven't had a Vanguard leader since Cade died, because everything's just been in total disarray. And that mission was special too,
because during
that mission you what
Olatrin or so there was supposed to be another god person who was supposed to be it because of like the laws and stuff like that.
Well, Aldrin, like the way the hunters the hunters deal is like, whoever causes the death of the previous Hunter Vanguard has to become the new Hunter Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
And so Aldrin, who was Crow, but previous life Crow, killed Cade. So in the natural order of selection, Aldrin / Crow, like by the laws of the Hunters, has to become the next Hunter Vanguard.
Right, and that's why he said by law he would have been it. But
Yeah.
it's just like Crow doesn't.
Yeah.
I think Crow doesn't know anything about that. So
Well,
it's like,
they know about the all the hunters know about the hunters bet or whatever, but like it's just this thing. Yeah.
but
But
Crow
like
doesn't
that
know. But Crow doesn't know about that other name. Is what I'm saying.
like the previous Hunter Vanguard.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't know his original name
Well, he
because.
does. He does.
Oh, he
It's
does know. Okay.
yeah, he knows he knows his past life because of events in previous expansions and seasons he knows.
Okay. All right.
But
Then that's fine.
but
Okay.
yes. Um so yeah, you go back and you see Zavala and Ikora, and then you see Crow with the new hunter cape and a new haircut, by the way. More of a man bun than a haircut, but it's better than the 2006 My Chemical Romance emo haircut. So we'll just say it's better. But you sit there and it's dark, and they say it doesn't feel right without Cade, and Crow is finally the positive, kind of quirky, funny one, and says maybe that's because we haven't celebrated yet. And they all light the lanterns, right? Like
yeah.
the symbol of like the darkness has been defeated, and we're celebrating Cade's sacrifice, and everybody's kind of celebrating. And it was a really nice send off for this, right?
Yes.
And I'm not gonna lie, I cried like a baby through the whole thing. But it
And
was really nice.
that was kind of, and I know we jumped around with the Final Shape, and that's why I say everybody, if you own Destiny, if you're and you haven't tried the Final Shape yet, we do recommend playing it. Like it 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 really is one of the greatest DLCs
Mm-hmm.
of any game that I've ever
Yeah.
played. Like I said, just the story, the presentation, the execution of the cinematics, the drama, the horror. It's just like, this is what I love about Destiny when it does stuff like this, because
Yeah.
it has more meaning to it and
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, if you've been playing from the beginning, you'll get a lot more out of this, obviously. But like, even if you're just like a casual player, like Ed, and have kind of touched little bits and pieces and kind of know the characters and everything, I think that was smart too, is to focus on the core four from that were in the game since the beginning, right?
mhm.
Like the Vanguards, the Vanguard, Ghost, and Crow, right? Because Aldrin's been in it since Vanilla, um, because he's the one that gives you the Vex time Gate Lord mission, because he thinks you can't do it, and you end up throwing a Vex head at him, and it's funny. But I think it's smart focusing on those four characters. I don't really want to get into the whole like Keith David replacing Lance Reddick aspect, because I feel like everybody's talked about that at some point.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was sad, but um, it threw me off at first. But I think with the direction that they're taking Zavala in particular, I don't know if there would be anybody better to replace Lance Reddick with than Keith David.
the
And
voice
I'll leave it
acting
at
is
that.
perfect. The voice acting is really perfect. When I was listening, like, really good. Well, Corey, we're gonna get into the future of Destiny, and then we're gonna end with the lasting influence of Destiny. The future of Destiny. So we know
Mm-hmm.
that Bungie is working on Marathon. They do have 3 episodes left for Destiny. For the season. Uh, oh yeah, the Accolades trailer too. I'm gonna do that one last. The Accolades trailer.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
but um, with the future of Destiny, me and you talked about this. Like, we think they're going to be a
Mm-hmm.
Destiny 3.
I
With
think, yeah, especially playing through Act One of Echoes recently,
mhm,
and the way the community is talking, and the way that Bungie seems to be restructuring recently, very recently, as of yesterday, actually,
yes,
their expansions director announced she was leaving Bungie, which she's been like really integral to reshaping, no pun intended, this kind of expansion output. So I'm really sad that she's leaving, but it's um it's becoming more apparent that we will probably get a Destiny 3 at some point, or just a game called Destiny again at some point,
mhm,
where they figure out how to integrate campaigns back into the main experience. How, and like, I think there's been two things floating around for a while. One is called Project Goliath. Um, and one is this new thing that they kind of introduced the other day, or a couple weeks ago at this point, I guess, was this thing called Frontiers, which Frontiers can mean a lot of things. Also, they
mhm,
use the Destiny 2 logo specifically with Frontiers, so I'm not 100% sure how that's going to evolve. But
yeah,
Destiny has been on a about a yearly cadence with expansion releases. Marathon is supposed to release next year. I think now, with the Final Shape kind of out and done, and these episodes kind of trickling out over the next year or so, I don't think we're getting an expansion next year. But I do think Destiny is going to come back bigger than ever once they do announce what's next.
yeah,
Um, and I think, honestly, this is the perfect time to jump on, uh, because the way the Final Shape ends is like your guardian is sitting on the like sitting on the wing of the helm, looking out at the traveler, and you see these little light spurts kind of fly out.
yeah,
Now you see three of them kind of pop out, but they have confirmed there are nine of these echoes, and which seems to confirm that there will be nine episodes of some sort, probably before the next expansion, which is weird. Uh,
mhm,
or we know of three right now. One is going on right now. Episode Echoes is going on right now, which takes place revolving around the Vex, and what we kind of this is being recorded on June 29th. So a character called the Conductor, which is who we think is the mastermind behind controlling all the Vex. The second episode revolves around the Elixni and the Scorn, and it's about vampire hunting essentially, and
mhm,
potion crafting, and we might go back to the Tangled Shore, it seems like, at some point, because we're taking on Fickrell, who was Aldrin's second in command in Forsaken, um, which is interesting. And then the third one revolves around the Hive and presumably continuing Savathun's storyline, but we're going back to the Dreadnought. And that third episode, we are the theory is that with this Frontiers initiative and the following episodes for this Frontiers initiative, is that we are leaving the solar system for the first time.
mm,
And so that's kind of what that is. But this Project Goliath, we know it has to do with Destiny as a collective, right? Like
yes,
all, like the games and the content and everything. What some people think is that it's going to either be a way to get the remaining Destiny 1 content into Destiny 2, also unvaulting the content that they vaulted for Destiny 2, and somehow making some sort of cohesive way of playing it all without it feeling disjointed. That's been rumored for about 3 years now. Beyond Light is actually when we first started hearing about Project Goliath. I don't know how much of that has changed based on the pandemic and the Sony takeover and the layoffs they had last year. I don't know how much of that has changed.
Yeah.
But that was a huge thing a few years ago that we've heard little bits and pieces of since then. And then we have heard, in certain areas that Destiny 3 is in full development. And um I think that is inevitable at this point. The way that the final shape ends and the way that these Echo episodes are kind of positioning things, and
Mm-hmm.
us leaving the solar system really makes sense that a new game is in development. Whether we get to bring our stuff over, whether we get to transfer content or not, that remains to be seen. It
Yeah.
would really suck to not do that again, because I think they learned their lesson the first time, hopefully, with Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, right? Where they kind of promised that we could, and then we ended up not.
We had to start like
I,
fresh, like straight
mhm.
Metroid
Yeah,
this.
I mean, that's literally what they did. It's literally what they did. They Metroided
Yeah.
us. Uh, so I think they don't want players to experience that again, but also they need a clean place for people to jump on. And a new
Yes.
game would totally 100% do that for new players.
Yes.
And I think the collective community, not everyone, but I think the collective has kind of um, come to the conclusion that it would be okay for a new game to exist based on the way that this all has kind of ended. Um, so, and then they're going to have to run Destiny alongside Marathon. Uh, also, um, so there's that. I think Marathon is going to be interesting because there have been rumors surrounding that game. I mean, they fired their game director like a year ago, and he's still pretty salty on Twitter about it, um, which is surprising and not surprising. Um, but Marathon is going to be their big PvP focus, and I wonder how that's going to change the way PvP is treated in Destiny, because to be honest, PvP in Destiny has been neglected for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of people have kind of just faced the fact that Destiny is a PvE game for the most part now, and PvP is just kind of like this secondary thing,
Yeah.
unless you're a Trials of Osiris player, which is like their main competitive mode. But I don't know.
Yeah. I think.
I think. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I think like if they could get Marathon into like some kind of like esport tournament and stuff, I think we'll get an idea what
Mm-hmm.
that game's future will hold.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think like Marathon is going to be almost like Bungie, where it has to have time to grow. Like if as
Yeah.
long as Sony is supporting Bungie to keep this game going,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's we could get an idea on where we could see what ideas they could implement in the future of Destiny and improve upon that and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and really get feedback. But Marathon is literally going to be the test, and
Mm-hmm.
Sony has to really support it, because I'm like, man, if y'all keep cutting people at Bungie, it's a lot of people are going to get worried about this game and worried about
Well, I
them.
think people are already worried about Marathon, but the thing is like Marathon seems to have gone from like an extraction shooter
Mm-hmm.
to a somewhat hero shooter, and people are kind of concerned because Sony is already putting out a hero shooter in Concord, right?
Yeah,
And Overwatch is still pretty popular. Um, Not that people wanted an extraction shooter, because that genre seems to have not taken off the way that people thought it was, right? Like,
yeah,
I mean, Tarkov, Escape from Tarkov is like the only one that's popular, and it's seemingly not as popular as it used to be either. Rainbow Six Extraction kind of just failed out of the
this
gate.
that game
Um,
disappeared.
I mean, even the Division's Dark Zone is not popular either, right? I mean, I think they've
Yeah.
like it still exists in the Division 2, but it is not an essential part of the game like it was in the first game. So,
Right.
um, I don't know.
Which
I think Marathon is in an interesting spot of like I wish they would just make a almost like a Halo style game where you can customize everything about your loadout, right?
hmm
Like the weapons are essentially like obviously not as long of a roster as Destiny weapons, but like you'll be able to find weapons and customize them with perks and stuff the way you do Destiny weapons. But it
yeah.
plays like Halo multiplayer, and you have to find the right builds and the right min max, and like have your team build around like a certain style, so you guys can optimize your play styles together, right? Like a team building style PvP game would be ideal, but I don't know. I think Marathon will have legs because it's a Bungie game.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how popular it's going to be, but again, it's a Bungie shooter. Everybody's going to be interested in it, at
It,
least initially. So,
it's funny, and sorry, Red, bring the side tangent that now Microsoft and Nintendo and Sony all got those three. We know about their first person shooting games, but they
mhm.
all do something different. Metro
Uh huh,
Prime 4 Beyond. It's going to be action, like the Prime games. That's Nintendo first person shooter. Um, Doom, the medieval Doom from Microsoft is going to be their single player. They may have multiplayer, but it's going to have that kind of focus. And then
hmm
you got Concord with Sony having this hero extraction. It's just like those three are the big
hmm
first person shooters for each of those platforms. And I
hmm
know people are excited for Metro Prime 4 and Doom. But if Concord could prove itself and be a really interesting game and people enjoy, that's going to be interesting. And when Marathon comes, I'm like, that's going to be an interesting first person shooter discussion to have. That
hmm
all four of those games are doing their own thing, and depending
hmm
on what kind of player you are, you may be getting some enjoyment out of each of them or all of them if you play all of them. Like it's kind of like first person shooters are in a good like to like kind of in a good place. And I'm not bringing Call of
hmm
Duty into this because that's an expectation. Um, but it's going to be exciting when all four of those games are out and what people think for
Yeah,
it. Um,
I'm interested to see what happens. I mean the PvP stuff. I don't know. Marathon seems interesting for people interested in PvP stuff. I don't know. I'll try it out for sure
mm,
because it's Bungie and I want to see what it's like. But like,
yeah,
PvP stuff is not hasn't been my thing for a long time. But that said, you look at how influential Bungie and Destiny have been over the last 25 years or so, right?
yeah,
Like people are still trying to figure out the Destiny. I mean, Bungie's still trying to figure out the Destiny cadence at this point, but like other people,
they have a
you look at
formula that just works.
I mean, you look at Ubisoft and the Division, they're still trying to figure that out. You've seen multiple games come and go trying to figure this out. You've
Mm,
seen people shift the way they make their game because of Destiny and the way it works and the way that they can't compete. Like, you see games kind of trying to copy Halo. Remember,
yeah,
Splitgate came out and was really popular for a while. Even 343's Halo is still trying to figure out how to copy Bungie's Halo, right? And
yeah,
in some aspects they're doing great, and other aspects they're still trying to figure it out. But I mean, Bungie has been very influential in the shooter space for a long time, and I think I think the Final Shape finally proves that they figured out how to do it. And we didn't talk about prismatic at all. We didn't talk about, some of the weapons that they showed off here. Like,
Yeah.
there's still a bunch of stuff that we didn't talk about. Dual Destinies, which is the new exotic quest, which is super interesting. um Prismatic like changes everything you think about the way Destiny works, right, with its
Yeah.
customization and everything. um Dual Destinies is a cool exotic quest that you have to do with another player, with raid mechanics and everything. It's really cool. So yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, the Final Shape is what Destiny players have been waiting for 10 years, and to stop now would be
Would be
very
insane.
foolish. And I hope they have a plan of what's next, because this is very clearly the direction the game should go moving
And
forward.
and from vanilla Destiny being what it is, and like even when it came out, it was getting like sixes and sevens. It had promise, and Bungie stuck to that
Hmm.
game and be like, we're adding stuff, we're changing stuff, we're adding stuff, we're improving, we're listening to the community. Like, it took gamers and it took ideas at the team to make it what it is now. And for 10 years to build it from
Hmm.
what it was, that's kind of how you do a MMO slash live service, wherever you want to define Destiny as. It takes
Hmm.
time and it takes work to get it to where it's at. And definitely with the content that they presented, it's going to take a while. If you give up because you're not seeing a quick success, you would
Hmm.
never realize the potential that you have. And I'm kind of bringing into this because look at the Switch itself. People wanted the Switch to fail because they were just like, it don't have the high end graphics, it don't got these games and stuff. And out of 7 to 8 years, you look at strong that the Switch has become with this console sale numbers, with the games that they present out, with the third party support, with the indie support. Like, it really got people to realize if it took time, it took investment, and it took us, purchasing the games and everything to see where it has came from system that we thought should fail and should not work, and it's been this strong for 7 years. That's the same thing with Destiny. It took time, it took the community, and it took, like, I won't say patience, but for some people it did take patience. It took a lot of work to get it where it's at.
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know and so I think that's part of the lasting thing. And we're about to get into the end of this, everybody, but the accolades trailer, Corey, I'm gonna hand this part over to you because this trailer really meant a lot. um and I want you to go ahead and speak on it.
um yeah, I don't really know where to to start. I wrote the review for the Final Shape for bossrush.net, and you know, since I was given a code from them once, uh once I reviewed it, I kind of I shared it and everything. And so their PR reached back out and said, "Hey, in future marketing materials, can we use your review for Destiny 2 the Final Shape?" And like, when you get a code for something and, they figure out that you do a review, or if you do something for it, it's kind of standard, especially for larger companies, to say, "Hey, can we use your review of our game?" And so I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." I had to like sign stuff and read a release and everything, which is, like I said, standard, whatever.
Hmm.
And it's Destiny. I'm like, yeah, if there's a chance that like I can even just see like, you know our name on their website somewhere at the bottom of like some review page or something, I'd be like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's us. Neat. um and so I was scrolling through Twitter at work, for work stuff, and I saw the Destiny Accolades trailer pop up. I'm like, usually I usually watch them, but I'm usually like half paying attention. I'm like, oh, cool, new Destiny trailer, whatever. I'm already playing. I don't really need to watch it, but I like Destiny. And I scrolled past it, and I was like, you know what? I should probably watch this. I just want to watch it. And so I watched it, and at the very end, the splash screen of reviews, the first two reviews you see are IGN's 9 and BossRush.net's 5 out of 5. And I was shocked when I saw it. Like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And so, I kind of texted our leadership team and said, "Hey, you might want to watch the Destiny Accolades trailer." um, and so, and like, I know 90% of the people aren't going to watch it because most most of our audience at Boss Rush aren't like Destiny players, and they don't expect Destiny coverage from us, right? A lot, which maybe
Yeah.
that should change now. But I mean, I thought about doing Destiny related stuff for a while, but I just haven't had time, and there's other things I need to do and whatever. But so I sent the trailer and a screenshot of the splash page at the end. Um, and this was a real full personal. I'll go personally first. This was a real full circle moment for me. Because you know the first group I did content with, like, one of my first podcasts was a Destiny podcast. Um, and it's still up on that YouTube channel if you want to go check it out. I mean, it's not worth listening to now, but um, this game has been very integral in terms of what I do now. It's been integral in building, you know, content creation teams. It's been very integral in building Boss Rush in particular. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I know Pal Block has been very integral to that too, right? But like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't, I personally would not be here without Destiny. Um, and so I watched that trailer probably, no joke, the first day like 70 or 80 times. The second day I watched it probably 30 or 40 times. I've probably watched it since that Accolades trailer released probably 20 or 30 times. The trailer has over 10 million views at this point on Bungie's YouTube channel alone, not
Mm-hmm.
including social media, not including PlayStation's YouTube channel, not including the PlayStation or Xbox stores, just on Bungie's YouTube channel alone, 10 million views. I cried, like, it, because it's a huge moment, not just for me, but for us as a team. Um, and it really solidified that, out of all these years we've been doing stuff, like, somebody's doing something right somewhere. And, the fact that that was like my review in a Destiny trailer, a game that I absolutely love
Mm-hmm.
and hate, but love. um, it was really a special moment for me. But I want to acknowledge the Boss Rush writing team also, because without them posting, like, I try to write articles, but like I probably write maybe, a couple a month max because of everything else that we're doing. And the fact that, Stephanie writes like 100 articles a month, and, Mary Helen writes probably, just as many. And, you have, Josh Martinez out there writing stuff, and the
Mm-hmm.
copy editors always doing things. And David running the ship like it's, I've never seen something so organized in my entire life, and just all the writers contributing, and all these articles coming out. And just for Boss Rush to get noticed at all is contributed to them, right? And
Yeah.
so the what I said to them in the writing chat in our Discord is that this is a huge Boss Rush team win, right? Because even though it was my review, this is one out of hopefully many more in the future,
Yeah.
and that it wouldn't have happened without them. And this was just the one that got picked, right? There are, probably hundreds of articles that come out on our website every month, right? In
Yeah.
various fashion, you know, and this review wouldn't have got noticed without them putting stuff out. So this was like a huge team win too, and like you got to give credit to David and Stephanie and Josh and Mary Helen and all of the copy editors and the podcast hosts that put stuff out every week and deal with my dumbass every week, and like all the stuff, all everybody's hard work. Like, this felt validating. This
Mhm.
felt just as validating as when we went to PAX and people were recognizing us, and it felt just as validating as like you know some of the other stuff that we've done over the last year. And this was like the icing on the cake that is on top of another cake, right? Like, this was a very special moment. I downloaded the trailer last week and saved it in a folder on my
Oh
on
wow.
my SSD because I'm so proud of this stupid moment. Like, it's just
It what's crazy though is that we was talking that Saturday before all of this even happened. It's just like, Ed, I'm about to go write my review,
mhm.
and the review dropped, and we all posting it, sharing it, and stuff, and then just what maybe it was a week later or a few days later after the review came
It
out,
dropped on
it made
Thursday. My review dropped on Sunday.
uh
Sunday, and the Accolades trailer dropped on Thursday. No, it was like a week and a half later because they reached out to me on a Friday.
on a Friday. Okay,
They reached out to me the Friday after my review came out, and it was out the next Thursday.
okay,
So,
and
yeah.
you text us and you were just like, Ed, how? And I was at work and
Yeah.
I seen it and I'm like, I had to scroll in because it was kind of far back. I scrolled in, and when I seen the score and it said bossrush.net, I'm like, this is a major. You know how I feel as it being major for you, but I'm just like, this is major because to have the site's name in one of the biggest games, one of the biggest developers in the video game industry, that's
I mean,
insane.
it's on PlayStation's website. It's on their store page. Like, it's on, like, this trailer is everywhere.
Yeah,
Like, it's not just like I it like I said, the only thing bigger at this point for me is if, like, we reviewed the next Legend of Zelda game and, like, our name was on that Zelda review or the Mario review, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
that would be like the only thing for me. That would be the only thing that could top this, is like, because, like, obviously Nintendo is Nintendo and they're just like the kings of everything. But the
Yeah,
fact that, like, Bungie, studio that's now owned by PlayStation, the creators of Halo, one of the most iconic gaming franchises ever made,
yep,
the creators of Destiny, which is also one of the most iconic franchises ever created, and, like, it's just, I still don't know what to say when people say things to me about it. That's like how shocked I still am about it. And like I said, without the team, and like also I didn't, Stephanie edited it for me and like did a great job editing it, and it wouldn't have been nearly as good without her helping me. And
Mm-hmm.
David walking me through the review process again, because I just don't write enough to have these processes memorized, right? So the fact that they like really, really took the time to help me, like this is just as much should be personal for them as it is for me. Like I just provided the information basically, and they just like really helped me, and it meant a lot that they took the time to do that. And I hope that they feel just as validated from this as I do, as we do, and I hope the entire team feels that way, you
Yeah.
know.
And I think in my mind or to myself, I don't know if it's true or not or anything, is that I'm like Bungie had to read your review. I mean, they just didn't see
Mhm.
the score. They had
Yeah,
to read the review, and definitely when you got to the end and all the thank yous and stuff, I was just like, something about this review touched somebody to be
yeah,
like, you know what, we got to put that score on there. And if anyone
yeah,
want to see why is this 5/5, go to the site and then read the review. And then I think the viewers, the readers, would definitely understand. You know.
yeah. And I mean, over the years I've become friendly with current and ex Bungie employees just from being a part of the community, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you know they're the PR company they work with now, Uber strategists. I've become as friendly as you can be with PR people, with Sean and CJ. So I mean, it's not like, I mean, it's, I do know people in that space, but it's still like, it's still a really like mind-blowing thing. It's still insane that this happened, and I'm very proud of everyone. I feel like I'm like rambling and talking in circles now, but my last thought on this, because I mean we have been going for almost 3.5 hours, but
Yeah.
uh, I am proud of everyone. Um, I'm proud of everybody who has contributed to this thing that we started all these years ago and had no idea it would ever grow to be this big. And
Mm-hmm.
we're in, you know, PlayStation trailers now, and it's insane. It's crazy, and I hope everybody, especially like on the current staff now, and not that ex staff shouldn't feel validated either, because they had a lot to do with building this thing too, but like
Yeah.
especially current staff should feel pretty, you know, they should feel proud too. I hope, you know, like I said, this was just the review that got chosen, and next, the next year when the new Mario game comes out and you write a review and people edit it and throw it up there, and Nintendo puts BossRush.net at the end of their trailer, like that would be awesome too. Um, so we'll celebrate when that happens. But and I should thank you too for making me continue to do this, out of all the times that I felt like quitting, or like we weren't doing the right thing, or like bad decisions were being made, which I still feel that way about a lot of things. But like this was, you know, yeah,
It's a
this
time to
was a
grow.
this was
Like I
a
said.
this was a full circle moment for me, and I will never forget this moment. You
Yeah.
know, so I mean, I've been creating content almost as long as Destiny's been out, and the fact that like the final shape, the final chapter of this Light and Darkness saga happens to be the one where it happens, it's like this weird scripted story that you could never like believe wasn't written somewhere,
Right.
so um
Should we wrap it
yeah,
up there?
yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, well, everybody, that's gonna be it for this video game book club retrospective about Destiny. I do recommend if you could get your hands on the first game, or if you just want to start with the second game, or it definitely is something to give a try to learn this mechanics, go learn the lore and stuff. I mean, it's very deep, and get some friends playing this stuff. It is a welcoming game, and people who are like Elder Ring players and Soul players, there are people who will help you and guide you. The Destiny community is big. I will
Mm-hmm.
say that.
Yeah,
So with that,
and
go ahead.
the community is usually pretty good at bringing, new players in, or what we call new lights or blueberries.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are pretty good. I guarantee at least one or two people out there that play Destiny, and they will be more than happy to help you, to onboard you, at least with mechanics and stuff. Story stuff, maybe you'll have to catch up on your own, but we
Yeah.
recommended a few places like, My Name is Bife is probably the best place to go. The Destiny Lore Vault YouTube channel is also a pretty decent place to go. Destiny's YouTube channel is becoming a good place to go just for like archived cutscenes and stuff. So you go there, but yeah, the Destiny 1 I think has a lot of value to it.
Yes.
It's also very grindy.
Yeah.
So I would like proceed Destiny 1 with caution. But I still think Destiny 2 is worth playing. As long as you get caught up on some of the story stuff. There was a story thing that I saw the other day that it was Destiny 1 through Forsaken in 20 minutes or so. Like they hit all the major story beats in like 20 or 25 minutes. I don't know what the video was, but that video exists out there too.
Yeah.
So
well, everybody, have a great week, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time on Video Game Book Club. Bye, everybody.
Bye. If you want to see how you can become a Patreon producer, head on over to patreon.com/BossRushNetwork. The Patreon producers for this month are Adriel Munger, Austin Campbell, Celeste Roberts, Christian S., Sana Dirrig, Francisco Santillan, Matthew Keel, and Todd Oxtra. Thanks for your continued support of the Boss Rush Network.